those of us that were on the site visit saw the settlement down at Week and the relationship that this application will have with that. I mean, I think if we do it, there are 3 or 4 houses along that, certainly no closer than Broome Park is itself, maybe a bit. Yeah, so just there. If we then,
that's the original route through Dartington, where it went through, where you got the church house. That's all been assessed for incredible heritage value, and it's all being assessed at the moment by the neighbourhood plan. And it's fascinating what's coming out. And if we overshadow that and just with this big conglomeration of housing, but also put it at flood risk, which is what I'll show you when that other slide comes up. I think we need to be very careful about what we're doing.
Come back out and go back in.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So anyway, members, I just want you to take account. So you're looking at all the heritage assets there. What would be quite useful if you just as a reference point, you can see Broome Park there with the houses already built there. And then when we go to a plan of the detailed layout for this new application, we'll see where those houses are and how they relate to the heritage assets in comparison with that. I mean, I think if we remember, there was quite so that where Christmas Cottage is written, there was an orchard, I seem to remember, planted in there, a new orchard. And then slightly just to the south of that was quite quite a thick hedge of quite semi-mature trees, I think, and right there. And obviously you're going to have the bank, the Devon hedge, well, Devon Bank with a hedge on top. But anyway, just bear that in mind. And then have you got the?
I'm trying, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. No, you're doing. It's good. Thank you.
Do you want the same bit?
Well, I think
that's just the critical surface runoff. That's not the flood zone one as well. That's just the surface runoff.
Gordon Bennett.
Okay. Okay, so
flood risk zones 2 and 3. Is that the one?
Okay. So that's just what's going on the surface, and you can see that culvert going across the field that they were investigating for when we went for the site visit.
Yeah.
So that's already addressing runoff coming from that field just to the north.
Yeah.
I'm a bit lost of where this is.
That's fine.
That's
fine. It hasn't got the critical runoff stuff as well on top, but you can see that the paler blue is flood zone 2, and the sort of more purpley blue is flood zone 3, which is the extreme. The small little bit between you can see that kind of bit that kind of looms up in the paler colour. That little bit of woodland there, that's the bit that's proposed to be removed and put an attenuation tank in. And my view is that, I mean, I don't think you have to be a qualified flood zone person to recognise that if you remove those trees, that flood zone becomes more put upon, especially since you've already got that runoff that's already coming into that area. And to take the trees out, put a big deep hole there and expect that to deal with it, rather than actually trees, which we know, especially willow, pump up lots of water, it seems madness. And I think we're putting the whole village at risk by adding to this. And especially since we've had this IPCC report that came out only in the last couple of weeks, which has shown that we've actually got a much more extreme climate emergency coming forward. I think we need to be very careful about what we're doing here. Do we really want to spoil Dartington? Or do we want actually a good assessment so that we can make a really qualified decision? That's why I'm asking for deferral. I'm not asking you to refuse it at this stage. I'm just asking you to defer and get those other reports in that could look at this more critically.
All right. No, well, thank you for that, Councillor Hodgson. And I've given you ample sort of time to make your case there. You've proposed a deferral. Before we take a vote on that, are we going to have a seconder? So will anyone second Councillor Hodgson's proposal to defer? No. So I'm afraid that we won't be voting on that. So we'll move on to the application will be heard as on the agenda. Right. So I will. Were there any more questions to Mr. Kitchen? before councillor panel.
Thank you. Two, could you show the elevation of the terrace houses? Were they the ones that will be near the entrance? Could you just show that again, if possible?
Apologise for the program's crashed, so I'll try to show you through a different medium.
While you're doing that, you might be able to answer verbally. Oh, are they the terrace ones?
No, I'll go back.
No.
So that being an end of terrace in the lower part of the site, the maisonette. That's freestanding maisonette.
Right.
Let me
The
find the
maisonettes will be in that run as you go into the site.
The maisonettes are in the southern part,
Right,
overlooking the play area at either ends of that sort of terrace.
Yeah.
So the run looking into the site is these properties. So a 2-bed there with render, and then for plot 1. So plot 1 being the stone, and so the end elevation facing the road is stone, and that's being render, and then sort of other house sites within that. Let me find them within that run. Being sorry. So yeah, the first run of terraces is effectively this house type, either in stone or render. So we're seeing both the stone version here at the bottom, and the render version there, in that run of 7 dwellings.
Thank you. And one other quick question. Is it intended to fence off the attenuation pond or not?
No, so the attenuation pond isn't proposed to be fenced, but the children's play area is fenced. Not because of the children's play areas themselves are being fenced, but the attenuation pond is open, but with the planting to avoid access into it.
What sort of planting will prevent access then?
That's the sort of that 3D view, but in terms of the hard landscape, the context plan, which involves both the
I'm just thinking of safety, and are you satisfied that young children of the age between needing a parent to go with them and being big enough to look after themselves, are you satisfied that there won't be a risk to children of ending up in the pond?
Yes, I'm satisfied in that in terms of the steepness or the battering of the pond sides, in terms of it doesn't fall away dramatically. The fencing in terms of the that leap, and also I've consulted with the open spaces specialist within the council, who's advised both on the nature of the play equipment, the fencing required around that play area, the routes through, and she is happy that the pond doesn't need to be additionally fenced in terms of being an issue in terms of having open space and attenuation pond next to each other. So she is satisfied with that as well.
Okay, members, any other questions for Mr. Kitchen? Yeah, Mark, if I was going to bring no one else here, I'll bring Councillor Long in from Teams. Councillor Long? Thank
you, Chairman. I've got a couple of a question, particularly about the fill, the movement of soil. Obviously, there's going to be a substantial amount of topsoil and subsoil removed on the site. and want to know where this will go and be used, because you mentioned a little bit of fill, and how much will this change the views? Because obviously you're talking about filling in a dip, and I noticed unfortunately couldn't go on the site visit, but noticed from your view where you said that you were filling in a dip to sort of sort out the level of the road, it was one of the directional views towards the church as well. And I'm assuming that there will be some adjustments there, and obviously had experience of from other sites where soil has been moved around on site, and we've ended up with properties being higher than they'd originally anticipated, and of course they're up, done and built. And it seems fairly, looking at this site, looking at what is actually going to be dug, from the point of view of putting roadways in, the parking areas, the houses themselves, there's a lot of soil to be moved. And I know they're not linked, but the developer has linked it, where they say in their promotional bits for both areas, 0 cartaway at sawmills, with any excess soil taken to Broome Park to provide fill, reducing waste and eliminating significant emissions. I have concerns, knowing how much soil is generated, that there's really no evidence or nothing sort of showing that soil will need to be taken off site. And I wonder whether there's an opportunity to provide more evidence of the existing ordnance survey levels with the proposed levels, because I have a fear that soil will be moved around on site and we will see different levels than what we're looking at now. Thank you, Chairman.
No, well, thank you for that. Just for those of us that did go on the site visit, there is quite a significant dip in the middle of that site. Some of it has been manufactured, I think, but partly to level up for the school. There was a temporary school there, wasn't there? So actually there's a pretty significant dip in the middle of that, which I assume that's where most of the soil would be going.
Chairman, on the site visit, there was discussion on this, that there would be properties, might be soil coming from the other site, or would be needed from the other site to fill that gap in. So I don't know that you're going to lose. I may be wrong, but I don't think you're going to alter the heights that much. But there is a drawing somewhere. There is a plan showing a cross section we've seen. Can you show that one?
I'll just leave. So this is a photograph looking towards the school. So this is the dip we're talking about. So to the left, that's that sort of temporary school site where I said there's, which is sort of artificially raised. This is the dip down here, and that's the line of that underground culvert as well, that Councillor Hodgson pointed out on a drainage plan going underneath there. And I did show you a plan which showed the this way. So this is a plan almost looking in the same direction. So we're looking at the front face of those terrace houses. So this is on the artificially sort of the raised bit at the moment. And then this red line, that's the dip. So you can see the area fill within there. We do have the levels plans which show the spot height, every single dwelling, every single garage, parking space, etc. It's one of those I can show you the plan, but it is in such small detail we won't really show on this plan. But it would actually fix the levels as part of this consent in terms of permission. If permission is granted, those houses would have to be built at those levels. So that's that area of fill. And the area of land where that's sort of taking place is this area here. So through there. And you're quite right in what's being proposed is that that it will take cut from other parts of the site to fill that, but also the next application will consider the sawmill site that has elements of cut as well and less fill. So there is so in the application documents it suggests that the some of that spoil or soil cut from the other site could be brought into this site for the fill. But also we do have the applicant here who's going to speak. So in terms of a question, in terms of they would have done their sums because obviously they have to pay for moving soil around. So it might be a question also directed at the applicant when they speak. So I'm repeating what is said in the application documents and what is shown on the levels plan, but basically ground raising in this area here, but elements of cut in this area here.
Okay.
And here.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Long, did you have another question as well, or was that it?
There was just sort of one of the points of I was surprised that there wasn't a high level of street tree planting. I recognise there are some, and there are some scattered around, but I would have expected a little bit more on a development like this.
Okay, I think that's more of a comment than a question.
It is, Chairman. It is. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. I understand that the wildlife habitats element, of which there's meant to be a 10% increase in benefit. Reading through the LEMP, it discusses that some of the mitigation for Sawmills Field will be taken up by this application. So why is it that it's only a 10% increase in wildlife mitigation on this site if it's meant to be also incorporating mitigation for Sawmills Field? And what is that additional expectation supposed to look like? And secondly, who will be responsible if there's severe flooding as a result of this development? Legally responsible.
We've had that question before, and I don't think it's a very satisfactory answer. Obviously, there's a management company that will be in control of the site. If people are flooded from water that's flowing from their land from them, it's the people from whence the water came. So I presume it would be the estate as it is. I don't think there's ever been a test case to say when a council or a drainage expert says it's fine and then it isn't fine. I don't know if there's any case law about that. Yeah, Mr. Fairbairn.
No, Chairman, I don't think there is, and I certainly don't think at the end of the day that it will be the local planning authority that will be responsible.
No.
Okay. I'm worried more about the people than the.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, Councillor Hodgson, and it's not the first time that's come up. We've raised it on other issues, and to be honest, I don't think there's a particularly satisfactory answer to it. And it may be that in time, and I'm sure with us, you say with the IPCC report, that there are going to be some flooding issues on many new developments, and someone is going to at some point going to be held accountable.
Chairman, we have to take on face value the officers in charge of that situation at face value, even when we have doubts, don't we?
Well, indeed. I mean, we are beholden to the experts to a certain extent, but I think that's members can make their own judgment on that, and with their own experience. Mr. Kitchen, yeah.
Yeah. So in response to the other part of the question, your first question about the biodiversity net gain. So let's look at if we look at Broome Park on its own, forget Sawmills because that's not determined at this stage. So Broome Park shows a predicted gain of 9.35 habitat units. That's a 68.77% increase. We require a 10% increase. So 68% increase in terms of habitat units. Hedgerow units would end up with 13.13 gain, which is 157.5% increase. And then with the enhancement of the woodland as well, 2.27 habitat units, which is an 18.74 increase. So on its own, Broome Park sort of smashes it in terms of biodiversity net gain. It provides way more than the 10% it needs. Now, obviously, not wanting to predetermine the next application, because we're not got there yet, but what is proposed is that if that one were to be approved, because that can't deliver net gain on its own, it would require some of the land around the, or some of the units created as part of the Broome Park. So if you put them together and do the calculations there, we still end up with an increase of over 10%, so a combined increase of just short of 13% increase in terms of habitat units, 161.9% increase in terms of hedgerow units if they're put together. But I think it's important when you're judging this application, judging this one first, without predetermining the other one, is that it clearly exceeds the 10% by quite some distance. And even if later on members decide to approve the Sawmills application, this one would still provide over 10%, and Sawmills would still provide over 10% when combined. So, but I think for the purposes of judging this application, you should look at it on its own. But I do mention in my report about some of that some of that you recalculate your sums based on the other application, but on its own, so we're talking 68.7% increase in biodiversity units and 150% increase in terms of hedgerow units.
Can I just ask what the timeline is when that's expected to be achieved?
I'll have to dig into the LEMP to find that one in terms of how long that takes. But as part of it's a lifetime of development. So some of those biodiversity units are taken over the woodland management plan of the 30 years. But I'll look into the LEMP in terms of when that is likely to be provided on site.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Kitchen? No, in which case we will move to the speakers. So the first speaker we have is Mr. O'Connell, who is objecting to the application. Sir, have you come forward yet to that? Sorry?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, sir, and you have, because it's a major, you have 5 minutes. If you're getting near the time, Miss Young will whisper in your ear that your time's almost up. Okay?
Can I just wait for the PDFs to arrive?
Yeah, of course.
It sets the timing, so you're all right.
Oh, that's
Just
great.
bring yourself to here and
Thank you. Thank you.
right. So you want slide 1 and slide 2, is that right?
If we can start with slide 1,
Oh,
and
yeah,
I'll give you a shout. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, committee. I was very disappointed with the presentation made earlier, and I'll talk more about that, but I'm disappointed because I'm a resident of Week, and I feel that that's highly underrepresented in all of the perspectives that are being given today. My name is Mark O'Connell. I'm the Director and Ofsted Registered Manager of the Apricot Centre at Huxham's Cross Farm, which is a carbon-negative regenerative farm and a wellbeing service for children and families. And we exist on the northern and western sides of the medieval hamlet of Week. We also farm the glebe fields on the northern boundary of the development, converting them to organic, and are already reducing flooding into Week Road. As a family, I live in a Grade 2 17th century listed building called Noddy, which shares the largest residential boundary with this development. Trudy Turrell told me the other day that a conversation at a recent public consultation, 2 members of Baker's Estate said to her, "Where are your objectors now?" I find this a disturbing and disrespectful comment, reflecting an attitude many of us have feared from when Baker Estates took on this land from Dartington. I can assure you there are many local objectors who are unhappy and very uninspired by the vision of the project. During a climate emergency, and yet There is also a great deal of resignation and fatigue amongst us. Where were we dealing personally with COVID, businesses dealing personally with pandemic and climate change, on lots of issues happening at the same time? It's been very difficult to make our objections and even understand this project. Right, this is my first holiday in 2 years, and here I am using it to represent some of the people in a week, not all, who can represent the whole community. So having shared my unhappiness with this project, I also want to say that there is a big wish for collaboration and community within the village of Week. Some of my conversations with local residents have been about how in future to integrate with the St. Mary's community when this development happens. Welcoming them. There is also a commitment to enhancing biodiversity in the area, and there are many people concerned about climate change, and I think you all better wake up to it. Right, so my focus is on the western boundary of this project. Here is the western boundary. There is a pinch point in the back corridor. Can you see it? Red arrow. The Baker Estate public exhibition boards clearly stated 20-metre wide corridors. I quote, back corridors on the northern and western boundaries 20 metres wide. Look for it in the documents. That's not being presented today. It was stated as the northern boundaries. It states in those documents presented to the community, northern and western boundaries. We would request that this area is redesigned and reinstate the proposed 20-metre bat and wildlife corridor. Can you see the pinch point? I hope you can. That's on the edge of my garden, my field at Noddy. We haven't seen an elevation plan showing what the development will look like from Week. The entire presentation has overheads. We don't see anything from Week. What will it look like on the hill, on the footer here? Thank you. I think we might be able to, goodness knows what slide we're on to. Much attention has been given to the views of Yarna Beacon, but locals are very concerned about the imposing nature of this, on the medieval centre of Week Village. The development plan has crept towards the centre of Week over time. Baker Estates have made a great deal about the high proportion of bungalows in the plan. Well, bungalows on this western boundary, can we go back to the original plan? Bungalows on this western boundary would both satisfy the view from Week, because we were looking at bungalows, rather than 2 stories. Now, I'm standing up here. Think of yourself as Week community. I'm a two-story building standing over you. This is what you will see from Week, just to give you a bit, because no one's gone down there to really have a look at it. Have a look at me. I have a 2-story building hanging over you, okay? That is what the community is concerned about. I haven't heard any of that represented in this presentation. Absolutely, as you can see.
30 seconds.
30 seconds left. Ah, okay. Agricultural style homes, they have, the things have been shown by Baker Estates have two stories of windows. I want to know whether that's likely to be the situation. We're concerned about tree planting and how that, 30 seconds is extraordinary. Anyway, all my, I think I've got the main points over there. There is concern about carbon, housing sectors. Okay, there we go. I've said it. You've got a sense of how I feel about it as a community resident, and there's other people in the week who feel the same way.
Thank you, sir. Did
Can I just show you that? Oh, it is the same.
were there any questions you wanted to ask Mr. O'Connell while he was there? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Foss.
Yeah,
So you want to just come back up there? That'd be great. Thank you. I understand. I feel your passion there.
I feel your passion. I understand how you feel about this and where you live and the rest of it. Have you had an opportunity at any time to make that to when Baker Estates have done a presentation where you could go and say, look, we're from Week, what are we going to see?
Very difficult. There was 1 minute time slots. It was my daughter's birthday, one of the presentations. I work full time. I've been working for 2 years non-stop. It's been very difficult to represent. Also, I don't think the expertise has been fully listened to about the flooding issue. There is broader expertise that needs to be looked at. And you just kind of waved that aside, and I think we should take the experts. Well, no, we haven't taken the expertise. We need to go further with that.
I was more worried about what you were going to be looking at from Week.
Yes.
Have you made that point to Baker Estates in any shape, form, or fashion before today?
We've written many times. We haven't had any satisfactory responses to our letters, and we've written over and over again. But also, it takes a lot to really work out what this will really look like to us in the village. I don't think half the villagers know what actually it's going to look like. Imposing like a 2-metre building over you like that, lights up here, looking down over you, over the village. That's what it's like. And if you go down into the village of Week, you will see that's what's going to be seen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, so thank you.
Well, I thought I'd give you the chance.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Chairman, please?
Yeah, Councillor Hodgson.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, Mr. O'Connell, if I may. Sorry to make you run around.
Don't worry.
I'm aware that you work the land as part of your work and planting a lot of trees. What would be your assessment on when the wildlife corridor that's being developed along that boundary, which I hear you say is not as wide as it's developed meant to be, when do you think that would actually have any kind of effect in terms of being value to wildlife, but also value to visual amenity from Week?
I mean, I'm glad that there is a back corridor. But I think what's happened is the back corridor has made all the buildings encroach on Week, so the environment has pressed the heritage issue. Because at one point, the whole development was going to be further halfway down the field. So it's a balance, isn't it? It's difficult. I'm not an expert in that area, Jackie, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions?
Can I ask a question of Mr. Kitchen just in response to one comment, which was, I understand your concerns about the overlooking, but you talked about lights shining down, but I understand that there'll be no lights overlooking the back corridor. Can Mr. Kitchen confirm that you won't be able to see lights from Week?
Well, the pictures are on the Baker Estates are two-story high windows. Can I show you that picture?
Perhaps Mr. Kitchen can explain it, because
This
at
is what Baker Estates have actually.
at the site visit we were told there would be no windows overlooking the back corridor.
That's the picture on Baker Estates board of a similar agricultural building. Sorry. Oh, I shouldn't be showing that.
No, that's okay. So those three, what Mr. O'Connell's saying is basically the lights out the back of those houses, you'll be able to see them down in Week. Now, we saw a light map, and it showed that there was very little light, certainly not above 1.5 luxes, thrown into the number one that you can see there. Also, members, I think you want to look at those three houses. Those are the three, that's what all those heritage sites that we saw down in Week, all those heritage assets, the listed assets down in Week. That's what you see. In comparison, and you can see Broome Park just at the top there. There's Broome Park, and that was obviously some of Broome Park is nearer to Week, and the ones down here are probably there's an element of Week that's nearer to the new ones down on the bottom there. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, I hadn't have my speaker. So, Mr. Kitchen, if you could just show, have you got that light map again?
Can I point out, Chairman, there's a difference between light spill and seeing lights in windows at a distance. I mean, we all know you can see kind of, the white light. It doesn't have to be spilling at you. That's the light spill program, to show the 0.5 lux, which is to avoid overspill into the corridor from back, which would be a direct light spill. But looking across an area, you will see lights at windows at quite a distance. Until that metro builds up.
But I mean, what you're not going to have is lights, beaming into your window, are you? Because if we could just have a look at and my understanding is that the internal lights are even conditioned here, aren't they? to prevent light spill, even, and this is with the curtains open, yeah?
Yeah, obviously this plan assumes, no curtain shut. So this as Councillor Hodgson right says, this deals with sort of light spill onto the ground and across the plane in terms of basically this demonstrates that within those areas of red you are over 0.5 of a lux. Outside those areas of red we're below 0.5 of a lux, and this is the line of the corridor with the Devon Hedge Bank as well. So there's no light spill into that area, but there's a difference between a light spill and being able to see a light on in a property if they have the curtains open from a distance. So if you can see that window, you would see a light on in it at night if curtains were shut. So I think that's a difference. And so these properties do have windows sort of facing out towards the west. And if you can see those windows, if there's a light on, you'll see it. But it's a difference between that and that light not spilling out to a point where it's going to have any effect on bats and wildlife. I think they're just two slightly different issues. One's a visual impact issue and one's an ecology issue.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. Right. Council panel, were there any more questions? No? Okay, lovely. Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Right, I'd now like to call Mr. Hutton as the supporter for this application. Mr. Hutton, sir.
Can you all hear me okay? Excellent. Well, good afternoon. I'm Graham Hutton, the Development Director at Baker Estates, and we own the allocated land at Broome Park. I last spoke to this committee a year ago about the outline approval and how it would set the bookends for the development. And indeed, the approved parameter plans and the Section 106 have shaped the reserve matters that are before you today. I spoke about the balance of the housing and the climate crisis, and since then the declaration of the housing crisis and this council's adopted action plan makes striking this balance perhaps even more relevant. So after a year of consultation and work with statutory consultees, I'm delighted that we've arrived at a fully compliant scheme to the satisfaction of all those expert consultees. Today's application is for reserve matters only, and in that regard I have just a few key points I'd like to make. 59% of the land will remain undeveloped. That's 59% of the land at Broome Park that we own would remain undeveloped. That's a massive amount of green infrastructure and open space, some 3.5 times in excess of policy. For context, it's 12 acres. Primarily, this has achieved significant biodiversity benefits and respects the back corridors approved at outline. It also results in an extremely low development at just 8.5 homes per acre. It will therefore feel rural in character, spacious and with visible links to the key character areas of Darkington. The woodland will be maintained in perpetuity, and the detailed woodland management plan has already been approved by your tree officer and delivers those benefits over a 5-year period. This includes the provision of an accessible hogging walkway through the woodland, providing a valuable connection with nature for all, and the desire for this walkway was clearly expressed at the public consultation. It's also been worked up in consultation with the Bidwell Brook School to respect the privacy and specific needs of their students. The maintenance of the 20-metre back corridors and the 10-metre ones on the south have been enshrined in a LEMP and will be secured in perpetuity through a management company. And whilst these corridors provide some publicly accessible spaces in the form of allotments and an orchard, the primary purpose of them, which is to sustain the biodiversity, is secured. Now, when the outline parameters were approved, we were asked to look at the size of the attenuation basin, and an additional season of groundwater monitoring since the last meeting here has given us sufficient evidence to be able to improve upon the number of soakaways on the site, to incorporate additional SUDS measures which improve water quality, and as a result the basin is now 38% smaller than it was at outline stage. And this has been approved by Devon County Council's drainage expert and your tree officer. It provides climate resilience, biodiversity improvements and an attractive open space. Climate resilience is hardwired into the design, and you will recall the provisions for a car club and or e-bikes in the Section 106 delivered through the travel plan. But Condition 16 also requires that we demonstrate how Policy Dev 32 is complied with, and that we have readily done. Your policy requirement of 20% improvement above building regulations will be achieved by 553 solar PV panels across this development over the 80 homes and an enhanced building fabric specification. Now, it may well be that this development will be built out under new building regulations which come into force this June, requiring further enhancements, but it is critical to demonstrate compliance with Outline Planning Conditions 16 and Adopted Policy Dev 32. Broome Park will be a really high quality place and the homes will address the local need. It is a policy compliant 30% affordable development where 65% are social rent. These are precisely of the type, size and tenure requested by the housing officer, and delivery of them is critically important for the 56 families on the waiting list in Dartington. Of course, the open market homes also play an active part in addressing the housing crisis, and the mix and size of these is fully in accordance with the mix approved at Outline and enshrined in Condition 17, 61% of which are bungalows or chalet bungalows, which is a missing link in the wider housing stock. So within the strictures of the Reserve Matters application before you today, it's the fact that your consultees agree that this application complies with your adopted policies and as a result would accord with the development plan as a whole. There is no higher hurdle than to satisfy the list of experts that have looked at this scheme. Therefore, I urge you to approve these Reserve Matters today because they are in compliance with the development plan, rooted in evidence and with expert approval of quality. But yeah, it is true, and it was in the papers, there was an area of stonework with defective workmanship there, wasn't there?
Yeah, okay.
We've repaired, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not sure that's relevant to the application, but you got it in. And thank you for answering it. Members, any more questions? No? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Right, I now call the Parish Council rep. That's Councillor Turrell.
What do I need to press? This one?
That's it. Yeah, you're all in.
That's it. Okay, you tell me when to start, Janice. Yeah?
Whenever you start.
Okay. Right, good afternoon, councillors. I'm here as the Chair of Dartington Parish Council to firstly request that you listen to our parishioners, because what I hear from so many people in Dartington is that they have lost confidence in this council. They feel their views and concerns regarding this and other recent developments are sidelined and ignored. Councillors will be aware of the contentiousness of this site. They'll be aware that there are over 400 objections at outline stage, generating pages and pages from this parish council of concerns. Yet what we see at the detailed stage is a largely unchanged design and layout from the outline. It's a suburban rollout that disrespects adjacent landscape and listed or historic buildings, and the style could be anywhere in Britain. Today, you are able to ensure that Baker Estates set the bar much higher to deliver the sympathetic development promised to us by Dartington Hall Trust. In the last decade, Dartington has been deluged in mediocre developments. We've had Meadowside, Origins, Yarner Mill, Beacon Park and Brimhay, all in the last decade. Together, they've increased traffic and speeding on our back lanes, caused our air to fall below World Health Organization limits daily, and depleted our habitats, damaged rural character and heritage, and increased flood risk. It's really important. Planners and councillors need to consider the cumulative effects of this development, not an island. The careful calculations of biodiversity net gain are meaningless when we add another lost habitat, we break another wildlife corridor to the recent builds we've had. Wildlife doesn't stop at the red lines on the plan. With extinction currently running at over 1,000 times the base level, it is willful blindness to accommodate greater horseshoe bats with dark corridors, then funnel them along to their deaths as they follow the flyways which they are set across the A384 facing road lighting 8 times their tolerance level. Our parish council have called for catchment flood modelling to assess the real effects of increasing storm and flood events upon the Bidwell Brook and the Dart. The assessment of this site only allows for 1 in 100-year storms based on 2013 data. The sad reality is that these figures are well out of date. If we look at Met Office climate models applied to the findings of the 2022 IPCC report, the 20,000 metres of impermeable surfaces that Broome Park offers will take 1 hour of 30mm rainfall to fill and overflow the 600,000 litre attenuation basin. We all know how long rain can last in Devon. Very seldom does it stop after an hour. And those 30mm events are doubling by 2030, 7 years' time. So that's why the Dart Academy was refused a few months ago. The Environment Agency said loss of life, and all that water goes down to exactly where the Dart Academy was going to be built. We have serious concerns about the design, layout and effects upon the landscape. Its prominent gateway site close to Grade 2 listed Field Church of St Mary's, the Doomsday Hamlet of Week, with serious concerns were raised by SHDC's own landscape and conservation officers. They're not here today. At the outline stage, again, little has changed. We are worried about the block of terraces right beside the A384, the coaxial runway that shapes a development designed around the car. The straight-line suburban style jars with a landscape of winding lanes, small clusters of houses, we've heard about Week, and that runway will connect the unrelated features of St Mary's Church with Yana Beacon. It'll be great for residents, but little thought has been given to the blocking the site for everyone else. The scheme does not meet CPRE's 12 Building for Life goals. There's little evaluation of how the large prominent development will sit in the landscape. In conversation, AR Urbanism design consultants working on Dartington's neighbourhood plan recently recommended that this scheme be reviewed by a design committee, as we have asked, as our ward councillor has asked. But I think it's been ignored for expediency. Thank you. We note that the transition homes took 9 years, so we're hoping you can spare a little more time for this one. It's fully within your power to demand better. A short delay now enables that you work better with Baker Estates to create a better design that would be welcomed by this community. We all need you to step up. You've acknowledged a climate and ecological emergency in 2019. You've signed up to that, you've declared it. We hope you believe it. More time and thought is needed before this scheme can do that. Please don't shortchange us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrell. Members, any questions? No? In which case we will move to the local ward member. Thank you very much. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to bash through the issues, really. We've had some very good speeches from a resident and from the Chair of the Parish Council, and I hope everybody's taken on board the points that has been made. I think we should be seeking that the attenuation pond, which is clearly a matter of concern, should be built under the parking areas across the site to avoid the removal of the wooded area and the many willow that are doing a good job. As I said earlier, their removal could threaten the 3 local schools that are very close by and would be in the direct line of any flooding that would come over from the pond. As we all know, once a bowl is full, it just spills over. As I mentioned, I did check the environment, DCC environment maps, and the trees show a detention pond to be created is in fact that those trees have been visible since 2010. We're not going to get trees that are actually doing that job for at least another 15 years. So why take them out? And I think if they can do it at Sawmills Field to put the attenuation proposals underneath the parking, why can't it be done for this site? Why put the community at risk with a big, deep pond, which as pointed out, I haven't actually ever seen trees that can actually act as a barrier to stop small children ending up in water. And children around the age of 3, it's a very serious matter. I wouldn't like to be a parent in there. I think also we need to be bearing in mind the IPCC report. I mean, we have declared a climate emergency. Dartington Parish Council's declared a climate emergency, so has Devon County Council. And we're ignoring that. And this recent IPCC report looked at, which is the 6th assessment report, it looked at the frequency and severity of extreme rainfall in the UK, and it's likely to be worse than previously thought, according to new analysis by the Met Office. The number of days where more than 30 millimetres of rain will fall in 1 hour in parts of the UK could be twice as likely by the 2030s, that's only 8 years away, and 3.5 times more likely by the 2070s. The impermeable area proposed at Broome Park is approximately 20,000 square metres. 30 millimetres of rain in 1 hour would be 600,000 litres of stormwater flooding the already full attenuation basin and overflowing into the already stressed Biltbell Brook. This will cause extreme flooding and possible loss of life, as was noted when we were listening to the explanation from the Environment Officer at that previous application just a few months ago. And as has been pointed out, possible mitigation could include the roads and driveways at Broome Park should all be made from permeable surfaces, rainwater should be stored for use, rainwater flushing toilets, etc. And these measures will only lessen the risks. Proper flood modelling for the catchment is urgently required, and I think should be conditioned whether or not you actually decide to go ahead, if you decide to go ahead with this. Heritage concerns, and I quote again the local resident and heritage professional, Dr. Hilary Wyatt, who wrote to you yesterday. I might add she's also written on a few occasions in the same vein to our senior officer, Pat Weimer. So these aren't just last minute points. This has been going on for quite some while. She was previously a parish councillor, and unfortunately her concerns have never been responded to. Hilary writes, in respect of Baker Estate's outline applications, Southam District Council's Heritage and Landscape Officers raised significant fundamental concerns, particularly in respect to the Broome Park proposal, which is an elevated site with heritage-sensitive boundaries. These concerns included the erosion of vernacular character, visually intrusive design, and loss of small-scale historic settlement pattern. The Councillor's Heritage Officer stressed the need for careful master planning to mitigate harm, particularly in relation to St Mary's Church listed at Grade 2 star, and commented on the lack of information in the application. Again, this raises questions about the quality of design and heritage advice given to the applicants in pre-plat application discussions. The detailed scheme now under consideration remains largely unamended and is rigidly suburban in character. Many opportunities for design improvement have been missed, and the proposal still clearly conflicts with NPPF JLP design and heritage policies. Nevertheless, the Council's Landscape Officer's updated comments now focus almost entirely on planting, but deciduous planting does not offset or mitigate poor design, nor will it soften the hard, angular urban layout criticised in respect of the previous outline application. The Council's Landscape Officer now states that in respect of the eastern boundary, the site layout respects the advice given by heritage colleagues at outline stage, as the first plots are modestly sized terraced houses that are set back from the entrance to the site, beyond the line of the graveyard and proposed allotments, and there are no large statement buildings positioned at the entrance to the development. However, the original comment of the Heritage Officer in respect of the outline planning for this site was the possibility of ad hoc or even formalised statement buildings on the road frontage is a concern, and as the probability of harm is greatest there. The setting of St Mary's would be best served by additional planting at the new entrance, not buildings. Consideration should be given to the development being wholly recessed behind the line of the graveyard and proposed allotments. This was our Heritage Officer proposed that. We're not seeing it. Regrettably, the original comments of the Heritage Officer have been taken down from the Council's website, as I've said earlier. Regrettably, the revised plan shows 7 terraced houses and bay parking poorly concealed behind the new Devon banks and a single line of deciduous trees. As it stands, the introduction of stainless steel lighting, terraced housing, allotment clutter and suburban road planting will unnecessarily harm the setting of the church, which is deliberately set alone, as is St Barnabas, also listed as Grade 2 star. It is unclear why the Council's planning officers have been unable to secure the modest improvements suggested by the Heritage Officer to protect the setting of a Grade 2 star church. Only 5.8% of listed buildings are designated at this level. It is unclear why Historic England refrained from making comment on an outline application with most salient details missing, and it is unclear why they passed up the opportunity to make comment on any future application at that point. Historic England customarily makes a comment on applications involving Grade 2 star, Grade 1 heritage assets. It's unclear how the Council has given design advice on this and other major applications in this area. It's unclear why the Council is not insisting on the use of design review panels for major applications. We always used to when I first joined this Council. An NPPF para 134 states that development which is not well designed should be refused. Wildlife concerns. I remind members that this site falls within the Greater Horseshoe Bat planning consultation area. It is part of that protected species for foraging, commuting and roosting area. I'm not satisfied, this is me, that this new development of another 80 new homes in this area, overdeveloped, will do nothing except disturb and destroy natural habitat, the biodiversity and associated wildlife, including internationally Greater Horseshoe Bats, need to survive and thrive. Bats don't just commute and roost along the wildlife corridor, they forage and feed in the open green fields around those wildlife corridors. This is net loss of important habitat associated with the wildlife corridors. And as we've already heard, it's going to be possibly 30 years before we actually see the increase in habitats that are associated with the requirements. Unfortunately, SHDC has not required formal ecological surveys with counts to even know what numbers or the different varieties of bats are present. I asked for this at the OPA. If we don't know what we have now, how will we know what we have lost at this stage or gained, i.e. whether the mitigation is actually working? We know we are losing wildlife at an horrific rate. Why are we not insisting on protecting wildlife corridors and the foraging areas associated with them? Regarding the LEMP, pages 9 to 11, regarding the removal of Himalayan balsam, should be modified to be physical removal, not chemical. The trust pesticide that was used last year is toxic to wildlife, waterways and grazing animals, i.e. including the deer, which are the symbol of Dartington's crest and still roam free in the area, or would like to. Himalayan balsam is best removed by repeated hand cutting and pulling. The current method is using highly toxic chemicals which should not be used in wildlife or public areas. And regarding the point 3.3, the intention to offset the loss of habitat at Sawmills Field by including measurements of additional hedgerow on this site, does not adequately manage the loss of hedgerow at Sawmills Field. The new additional Devon banks at hedgerow at Broome Park, which the LEM cites as a net gain of excess of 10%, will be achieved for the development at Broome Park and cumulative in consideration of development at Sawmills Field West. This is highly inappropriate to suggest this kind of deal and misses the point about protected species' need for contiguous habitat that links across the area. To do otherwise will simply be big gaps that is not the intention of Dev 26 bullet point 3, which states that development likely to have a harmful impact on locally designated sites, their features or their function as part of the ecological network will only be permitted where the need and benefits of the development clearly outweigh the loss and where the coherence of local ecological network is maintained. I suggest to you that it's not being maintained through what's going on here. Where is the archaeological review by Devon County Council officers regarding this site and the outcome of the written scheme of investigations as required by condition in the officers' report to the outline planning? This is important as Roman and earlier artifacts have been found on this site, and this review is needed for an assessment of suitability of certain areas of the site that could be avoided by the buildings. We should not be approving a development that has not reproduced the reports and documents sought over a year ago. I believe this is overdevelopment of Dartington. The additional 80 houses in this application is overdevelopment of the area and the site. It is turning a rural parish into an urban area and changing the very nature of the parish. Baker's estates do not have to build 80 new homes here. They do not have to build houses right up to the front of the site. Other new sites with 80 new homes do not need a widening road with a right-hand turn. If this is considered such a sustainable site, why is this very urban road modification needed? Many comments have been provided to the Council's planning officers and to Baker's during the process of the development of this site. It could have been something wonderful, but it is not. We need confidence in the planning system. I support the many residents in this area and further afield that are bewildered by the excessive and urban development being dumped in Dartington. This is not following any realistic sustainable development policy, nor is it providing the housing we actually need to meet the housing crisis we know exists. It is simply another 120 mostly unaffordable houses, many of which are likely to become second homes and holiday lets and threaten the area with flooding and loss of wildlife. Interestingly, despite this council approving a motion that required draft 106 agreements to be brought to the attention of ward members before being finalised and signed, the S106 for the outline of this application was not sent to me, or the one for Sawmills Field. It's very difficult to have confidence in the system at Southampton District Council, and I won't mention the PPA, but I think we all know that that exists, and it's not on the site. I was assured by the monitoring officer sitting in this meeting that in fact the PPA would be mentioned on every application for Bakers. It's not on this website, so how can people be sure of what's going on? We can do better than this. I urge my fellow councillors to listen to the clear and very reasonable concerns of the parish council and local residents. Councillor Turrell set out these concerns very clearly. I believe our standards have declined regarding public consultation and peer review. I know we've had COVID, but so what? I think we should still be now building back and actually looking at how we can really develop what's left in the JLP well. So please support my call for refusal so that Bakers can go back to the drawing board and refine their plans to provide what the parish would welcome and receive well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Members, any questions to Councillor Hodgson?
Yeah, Chairman, there's one comment, and I've listened, and if you don't mind saying, you could have slowed down a little bit, actually. You were trying to get a lot out in a short period of time. I was trying to listen to what you were saying. There's one thing that was said you said, and there was one on site, that toxic chemicals have been used down in the bottom. What toxic chemicals? It's easy to say it because as a farmer I know that most of the toxic chemicals that we've been using have gone. They're not there, they don't exist. Any chemical, according to some people, are toxic, and I think it's just, it doesn't help the case, to be quite honest. If that's the case and you can prove it, fine, but I'd like to know what toxic chemical. It puts a wrong picture on it. If you can tell me what they are, fine, but if not, I just think
I can answer that.
It doesn't.
No, I agree with you. I can answer that. There was concerns raised to me last year that there was spraying going on all around the wildlife area by the river, while there was clearance going on already in that wooded area. And so Bakers wrote to me and told me what they were using, and I investigated it, and it was called, I can't remember if it was Thrust or Trust. Either way, it was a bit of a weird name. And as far as I could make out initially, it was banned in 2016 in this country. I got onto the county office ecology, so I've done my homework on this. And she sort of looked at it and she thought it was all right. But what it was saying was that it should not be used within 5 metres of a waterway, and it certainly shouldn't be used anywhere that grazing animals are. Now, everybody knows that there's grazing wild deer. So saying that, it was okay because there was no field, no cows in the field. So that's where that... Exactly. So thank you for the question.
There's a matter I just need to correct, because Councillor Hodgson referred to the Section 106 agreement and not having seen it. I have an email from Councillor Hodgson dated the 4th of October, which says, "Dear all, just to confirm, I've received independent confirmation that means I'm satisfied to go ahead with the Section 106 as it stands." So I do believe the process was followed, Councillor Hodgson.
My apologies if I missed that one.
Okay. Well, that's clear that up. Right. Any more questions for Councillor Hodgson as the local ward member? We will now move into debate on site. Who would like to start? Any takers? No?
Go on, I'll go first, Chairman.
Yeah, all right. Councillor Foss.
I can fully understand the community's concerns about this, and we've had this how many times before with communities with building. There's been much made of flooding. Unfortunately, as members in this room know, we had a situation in another place, in fact in Councillor Brazil's ward, where we had a very, very, very qualified expert who put up a very good case against the County Council flooding expert. It landed up at appeal, and although the acknowledgement was that expert was very good, excellent, the inspector still went with the County Council flood. Luckily, because our expert was so good, we didn't lose it on cost. So unless we've got somebody that is really, really well qualified to question what the County Council flood expert has said, it's a very difficult road to go down to say we could turn it down on that fact. Another one is that Councillor Hodgson said it, and I know I've heard it said many other times, is, oh, well, these will be holiday homes and oh, you know, and all the rest of it, there won't be people. I know of another site, I don't live very far away from it, where it's exactly the south side thing was said. And there are now, and Councillor Taylor can back me up on this, when you go there in the morning, you see literally tens of mums and kids walking up to the primary school, and others waiting at the bus stop to go to the bigger schools. So this idea that it's just going to be old people's homes and holiday homes, it's easy to say it, but from the where I'm sitting, we've seen these houses filled with people that actually live and work here. So that's just a preliminary, Chairman, I want to say. Perhaps it might start some conversation, but I'm fully sympathetic when you've got a new housing site come in like this, you know, and all the rest of it, but we just need to think logically through it. I've got concerns about some of it. Yes, of course I have. But I'll say that, and just perhaps we can have a really good debate about it, because I think it deserves a good debate. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Foss. Councillor Brown, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Chairman. And I want to echo a lot of what Councillor Foss said. I think that we can all feel clearly there is opinion about this, and I've always maintained in my time on this council thus far that planning impacts people in a way that very few other areas of government policy do, because it is affecting the built form of one's local area, and that affects people in a way that not other many areas of government policy actually do. And that's we hear your concerns. I did find the site visit to be extremely informative, particularly the pure amount of space that we covered on that visit and all the different views that we managed to see. Clearly, we are here today to consider this as a reserved matters application, so the principle of development on this site has already been granted. That's what we're looking for is not necessarily numbers, but landscaping, site layout, and scale and massing of this site. And much of that I don't have any problem with at all, to be honest with you. I think that a lot of the local landscape has been taken into account in terms of the through road and the views over to Yarna Beacon and indeed the church. And clearly there will be some kind of impact. I'm not saying there will be no impact whatsoever, but I think that has certainly been taken into account by this. I also do welcome the efforts on biodiversity net gain and the climate change commitments made within this application in terms of, we always talk about drainage. Now, there may be concerns about the drainage element here. As has been referred to previously, the expert on the drainage matter has said there is no problem with it in their view, which means that in the event that we refuse the application based on drainage, then the applicant will go straight to appeal and win, because we've been told that in the expert's view, the drainage is not a problem here. So, but I hear what they're saying on that. So, I do think this is a relatively sympathetic design and landscape. I think clearly the buffer zone, the ecological buffer zone for the bats, obviously is in compliance with the regulations as we understand it. So, with that being said, I've obviously listened to the presentation, I've heard all the speakers. I would be prepared to move approval in accordance with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Abbott, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Rowe.
I've just been saying I would like the slide up of the estate with the map of Broome Park, and the case officer is just looking at that now. Yes, that will be fine, Mr. Kitchen. So what we see there at the western end of the proposed new estate are the two-storey houses, which will change the outlook from the village to the west. But just to the north, Broome Park are two-storey buildings as well. And what I did was, during the talk, was to use Street View to look along the northern of two parallel roads which trend from southwest to northeast. And on the northern one, you get a view of Broome Park in the distance. And of course, a two-storey building changes its angular impact upon you as it gets further away. And what I don't see here is overbearing. Not in the present estate, and the other estate will be very similar to it, and no further west than, not as quite as far west as in the proposed new estate. This estate to me is not urban. This estate is well spaced with a whole range of a mix of houses. I would be pleased to be living or near an estate like this in comparison to houses all on top of one another. I think this provides an interesting mix with an interesting route through and walkways which give long views as well. I think to keep towns alive with new people and to allow locals to live, this is a very pleasant example of what can be achieved. And I will second this proposal to go with this.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, unlike a previous speaker, the gentleman who was the objector, and he was not impressed with the planning officer's presentation, I actually thought it was full of information. It had more information in there than we could probably take in the space of an hour. It was really informative, and I would thank him for his really excellent presentation that told us everything that we actually needed to know. And there are two things which I think people deserve in this life if you're of working age, and one is a home and the other is a job, and you can't have one without the other. And this estate, the development is a proposal of 80 dwellings, 20 of which are affordable homes, 16 social rented, and 8 shared ownership. So that will give young people and people who want their first home maybe a chance to get on the housing ladder. People will say, well, they're too expensive, but we know the council's now started a new scheme whereby we're giving them £5,000 as a deposit if they are already in a rented house, and that will, I think that will help. And we've also got staircasing, which will help people to be able to get on the housing ladder. So I welcome that, and I think all the points have been really well covered. I would say that on page 51, and I think we did point this out last time, where we're going to have a zebra crossing. It's not on the A358, it's on the A385, or is it 4 along Dartington? I'm not quite sure. We've got the A385, I know, over in my side of the patch, but not. It does say zebra crossing on the A358, and this A358 is nowhere down there. It's probably up north somewhere. That's the only point I would make. But I think I sympathise with Councillor Hodgson and people in Dartington, but I think that Dartington is a good place to buy a house to live, because you can get to Plymouth quite easily and you can get to Exeter quite easily, a lot quicker than if you live over in the far east of the district. So I'm sorry, but that is how it is. And we've all had loads of new houses imposed upon us, but that's life. And that's the way it goes. So I will be supporting this detailed application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Yep, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just a quick observation on the attenuation pond. I found when I had one that it encouraged wildlife rather than discouraged, because we had much more wildlife, aquarium, birds, ducks and geese and everything else. So it's not taken away, I think it's adding. So I would support this application as well.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott, can I just ask you to turn your... Thank you. I can't see any other speakers. Councillor Pannell, sorry.
I just wanted to draw attention to the comments that have been made by objectors to the straight line and the terrace housing. But I know the area, and I know if you look at Cott Road, is it Cott Lane? I can't remember. Cott Road. You've got the arms. Well, I think where the almshouses on the right. They're in a line of about 7 or 8 houses leading up to the village hall. If you go further up, there's other straight lines of housing. What was I guess, social housing. It's not unknown for this type of housing in Dartington. I do think that the fact that the allotments are on one side does open that up and make it less like a suburban street. I think it's unfortunate there is a long road leading into the estate, but if you look at the constraints of the layout of the land, it's very hard to see how else that could be developed. So I do have some sympathy with the developers in trying to address that, and the fact that the allotments are on the other side does help to mitigate that to some extent.
Thank you, Councillor Panel. Right, I've had a proposer and a seconder for approval as per the officer recommendation. Councillor Hodgson.
Perhaps you didn't catch what I said. I moved actually a refusal at the end of my presentation.
You did. We haven't had a seconder for that though. So I'm going to take the proposal and which is for approval, which has been seconded.
Are we going to actually talk about conditions first, or are we just accepting all the, what's on the page?
If you feel that there's, I mean, at the moment the proposal is for as the conditions there. If there are other conditions that you see if the proposer and seconder are prepared to take those on, or if they're acceptable, yeah. So far away.
Thank you. Yeah, I would actually like to see that flood modelling is actually conditioned, so we actually get some confidence. I think there's no reason why we couldn't require a developer to actually produce flood modelling. It might be retrospective, but at least we'll know where we are.
I'm not sure. I mean, it sounds okay, but I'm not sure. No, I don't. Anyway, let me go to the proposer and seconder. So it's proposed by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Abbott. What are your views on flood modelling, given the comments we've had from the drainage things? I mean, I think what we're saying is we're going. You can't say you've got to have a flood modelling because you're almost saying, well, we're refusing it on drainage grounds, and I don't think.
I think, Chairman, I appreciate what Councillor Hodgson saying. As I said in my remarks, the drainage experts, the drainage authority on this matter, have said that they do not have a problem with it. Thus, and as I said, thus should be a based on refusal on drainage. It would have presumably been appealed because the people that tell us the expert advice and the authority on the matter has said that they don't have a problem with it. So I don't think what Councillor Hodgson is saying is necessarily necessary.
Okay.
I mean, the second may have a different view. I don't know.
Well,
but,
I mean, you've got to both agree, I'm afraid, on that. So no, they're not going to put that one in. I'm afraid, Councillor Hodgson.
Okay. Regarding the LEMP, regarding the removal of Himalayan balsam, as I was explaining in response to Councillor Foss's questions about the use of pesticides, could we condition that is removed physically by hand and not through the use of pesticides?
That I would be happy to support. Yes.
Happy to support that.
It would depend if it has been referred to in the ecology report as being an issue. You can there's certain tests that conditions have to pass as being necessary as one of the tests, and we would need to have evidence of it being necessary for that condition to be added to the consent.
So I can come back. And it's important to being a reserved matters application. So planning policy guidance, so the government's guidance on planning conditions. In response to the question, can conditions be attached to reserved matters relating to outline planning permissions? It says the only conditions which can be imposed when the reserved matters are approved are conditions which directly relate to those reserved matters. So in this case, the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. Conditions relating to anything other than the matters to be reserved can only be imposed when outline permission is granted. Now, as part of the outline, we required through the section 106, required the submission of the LEMP, Landscape and Ecology Management Plan. So that we've already secured the requirement to submit it. So what I'm saying is we can't put a planning condition on reserved matters relating to the LEMP because that's been secured. But if it was a case of that is an issue which we could demonstrate that there's some sort of harm from or saying that it has to be hand pulled rather than being sprayed, then we'd have to get them to amend the LEMP to do that. But we can't add it as a condition on the reserved matters.
Okay, so sorry, Councillor Abbott.
Nevertheless, if the conditions of use of a chemical weed killer say that it should not be used within 5 metres of a waterway, then that must be an enforceable condition under civil.
Well, yeah, criminal, I think. Isn't it?
Well, that's not under our jurisdiction.
Yeah, no, I think that's what Councillor Abbott's saying.
I think you need to go to the
environmental
agency and get them to look at it.
So if they're using it
very quickly,
a pest or herbicide within 5 metres of a waterway, which sounds like from what they may well have been, I don't know, but then they're not allowed to do that. But that's not for us. That's for the Environment Agency to enforce on that one. So I think from the advice that we've been getting, that we can't actually do that hand-pulled one. But obviously, if it's within 5 metres of a waterway, then they've got to follow the rules that cover herbicides. Yeah. Were there any other conditions?
I don't think this application should be offsetting the loss of habitat at Sawmills Field. I think it should stand alone.
Yeah, well, you can vote against it on those grounds, but we've got the application before us. That's not something that we can change here about that. I mean, that's what they put in. What you can vote against Sawmills and saying you don't think that they should be able to piggyback on this one, and that's a perfectly valid reason. But I don't think that's a condition or anything that we can do here. No. Okay, well, look, I'm going to move to the vote then, please. I've got a proposal for approval, which has been seconded as per the officer recommendations. We're going to stick to the conditions that are there as listed. So can I have a show of hands for all those in favour of the application? Please show. And those against?
Chairman, that is 8 for and 1 against. The motion's carried.
Thank you, members. That application is approved. We'll take just a 12-minute break, so 25 to, if you could be back in here for the next application, please. Thank you. In which case, thank you, members. Hope you've suitably refreshed. We now move on to application number 44321. Mr. Kitchen, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So now we're moving across the other side of Dartington to Sawmills, another reserved matters application for the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale for 40 dwellings. So outline permission granted or considered by committee this time last year, and resolution to approve subject to the Section 106 agreement. That 106 agreement was completed in October last year, and the planning permission was issued. So it has outline permission for 40 dwellings, and we're dealing with the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. So the application, Sawmills application site, is next to a site known as Origins, which is not shown on this plan, but is shown here. So Origins is built out as a development, and this is the Sawmills site here. As part of the outline permission, access was determined at that stage with two access points. The main access point being off the 385 in this point here, and that's to access the bulk of the dwellings, but with a secondary access off Limberland Avenue, which was limited to a maximum of 5 dwellings. So that secondary access was only able to access 5 dwellings, and this is the parameter plan that was approved as part of the outline application, which effectively just sets the access points, the numbers of dwellings coming through each of those, and the required 10-metre wide dark corridor along the northern and western boundaries. This is the access plan which was approved at the outline stage. So new main access going in with shared footway pedestrian route coming out on the front, and a new bus stop here. That also include a vehicle, a pedestrian crossing point, uncontrolled crossing point with a central island refuge at this point here. So some road widening to allow that refuge island to be put in, then with cycleway, footway running all the way down this side, and also crossing point to a cycleway, footway which runs down the other side of the lane as well. The site, as the members will recall from the site visit, sort of gently slopes up until a point where then it sort of steeply kicks up again, and this northern part, and this is the area where there's quite a significant amount of cutting required to set the dwellings down in the landscape, and I'll show you some cross sections of that in a moment. This is the proposed layout. So with the main access point here with sort of central road coming up, and then secondary access off Limberland Avenue coming here, so maximum of 5, and then with a pedestrian cycleway linking the two bits. So we have connectivity, but not for vehicles. Part of this design already is to follow the Limberland Avenue and Tremlett Grove, and also keep a visual link through to Yarna Beacon, which we saw on the site visit, and then at the front of the site, so 4 short terraces of 3 and 5 dwellings along the front, with parking to the front, and then a stone-faced Devon hedge bank separating that parking area from the road, and I have a cross section to show you of that as well. It's the sort of coloured layout as proposed. One of the things we've done during the application process is change the road surface here to a sort of a concrete imprint, which would look like a granite set. So rather than have blacktop tarmac macadam all the way through, trying to slow vehicle speeds down, give a different feel for this area in the centre, sort of this, not quite a central square, but a central area where it becomes more of a shared space, and with slow vehicle speeds. That's that point I said about having a link through the two parts. So I think the development works well together in terms of visually it connects, but we also stop cars from moving through and using any kind of using Limberland Avenue as a shortcut, but allowing pedestrians, cyclists, and people to actually use it to get down to the playing fields to the east. In terms of building heights, yellow being 2-storey, the red being 1.5, and the blue being single-storey garages. So two-storey on the front. As we move up the slope, we have some single stories, and then where we get into the properties which are quite getting cut into the slope, where it kicks up, a mix of 2-storey and 1.5-storey there. Just the parking strategy showing parking spaces per unit that meets the SPD standard. Also having electric vehicle charging points on plot. Every dwelling with on plot parking has its own dedicated electric vehicle charging point. Communal parking, shared parking areas have shared electric vehicle charging points as well. In terms of what the development would look like, so houses mainly render with timber cladding. That timber is a natural finish, so different from Broome Park, which was a dark finish timber cladding. These ones have natural finish, which is very much aligns with what's happening next door on the Origins estate, which is a mixture of stone, render and timber cladding. It does have some elements of dark cladding as well, but I'm not sure they're quite so successful, so we've not got any of those in addition, because I think it's one too many materials on a dwelling, so just the natural timber finish. This is looking up the access road off Limberland Avenue with that for the 5 dwellings. As you can see, tree in the way to stop vehicles coming through and landscape in the way to stop vehicles, but pedestrian cycle access through. Just a plan with house types, which I can come back to if members have any particular questions on it. But in terms of the affordable housing, so this outline secured the full policy requirement of 12 units. They are contained within these 2 terraces along the front, a mix of 1-bed maisonettes, bookending the 2 terraces, and then 2- and 3-bed houses as part of the terraced units. These ones here, the terraces here, are the same appearance but open market terraces. And what that would look like from the road is this top section here. So the gap in the middle, that's the access road in. So the maisonettes sort of bookending either end of these 2 terraces of 5. So that's the view from the road, from the main road looking in. And then on the sort of secondary road, sort of marked between the areas B and B here, looking south in a southerly direction, that's the mix of sort of 1.5 storey dwellings, which are on the sort of the lower side of that road. Further up to the top, I think on the site visits I mentioned there's some sort of significant areas of cut required. These are the dwellings which are in that cut area, the red line being the existing ground level, and you can see how those 2-storey dwellings there are cut into the slope. So existing ground level here, Devon hedge bank. So we get to the point where the top of the Devon hedge bank is already into the first floor of that property. No windows on that side because it's facing onto the dark corridor. And some of those areas would require the gardens to be terraced, so that we don't have too high a wall on the northern boundary. I do have a plan showing the positions of bins here. Happy to talk to that to members if they wish, but I'll come back to that. And also have a plan showing the materials if required. The highway proposed for adoption is shown in grey here and brown. The colours are indicative. It's not actually the colour of the road. So areas of light grey and dark grey are effectively blacktop highway. This area shown in brown, that would be the area of concrete imprint, which would be like a granite set, so a light grey finish. That is something which got negotiated into the application with discussions with the landscape officer and the highways officer. You'll see in my report the highways would prefer not to have this and prefer it to be blacktop throughout for future maintenance reasons. But I think the local environment we're asking for people to live in, I think it's more important to get a contrast and get more of a sense of place by having some different materials in there. And that is why I'm putting forward a recommendation to approve the granite set finish rather than a blacktop, traditional blacktop finish in this area. In terms of drainage on the site, so a mix of, if you remember from the outline, there was, we talked a lot about drainage on the site, and there were some parts of the site which are suitable for soakaways, and those are the ones which are in sort of red, and you can see the soakaways marked in blue. So these properties would go to soakaway. Areas of this pink area here, so that's permeable driveways, and then the grey ones which are not coloured in, that is to drain to an attenuation tank, which will be housed underneath the parking area to the front of the terraces here. So if members recall, on the original outline, there was at one point there was a suggestion that a drainage pond off-site, which was felt to have its own issues. So we moved sort of one down the suds train and gone to tank storage rather than surface water storage surface storage off-site. So it would go into a tank, attenuated, and then released at a controlled rate through a 150 millimetre pipe towards the Wren Brook to the southwest. In terms of the those drainage areas, again, just showing the permeable and impermeable areas. So anything in dark blue driveways are permeable. Anything in red are driveways which go to soak away. But the important ones, I suppose, is the buildings which go to attenuation, which are the purple, and the roads also go. So any building which is purple and the roads go to the attenuation feature, and this parking area, the light blue parking area, also goes to attenuation tank. We do have some rainwater gullies and sort of rain gardens up in this area here to create additional sort of filtration down the suds train, as it were, and also along the south side of this parking area. And then the driveways which go to the attenuation areas also are served by smart gullies, which is a filter to filter out some of the oils and other things which you can get off the road. Tree protection plan, so no trees proposed to be felled to make way for the development itself. The front hedgerow, which is again quite recent, it was put in as part of, or the hedgerow to the east of the access road, which was put in as part of a road widening scheme when this roundabout was constructed. That is to be removed, which is sort of set by the outline access, but with a new hedgerow or hedge bank put in with planting on top, proposed as this application. A combined soft and hard landscaping plan, this showing sort of where those sort of green surfaces are and hard surfaces are. As part of the application, the landscape officer and myself have got in some additional tree planting through the main route into the site. So we've added some benefits there, and also brought in a route through the so walking route through the dark corridor, which allows for sort of informal open space, walking through up into a woodland area, which has to be managed as part of a woodland management plan secured by the outline. So we have a walking route there. So sort of informal open space for walks, dog walking, etc. In terms of the hedge banks, very much like previously, we have a mixture of turf-faced and stone-faced hedge banks. So I think these are the turf-faced ones along the back corridors, and where there is areas of cut, we have the stepped bank. And then on the front, the highway front, would be a stone-faced Devon hedge bank with planting above. So that's 1.4 metres high, with then planting on top of that, being beech planting to tie in with the nearby hedgerows facing other development. I said I had a section going through, so this is a section running across sort of the road, across the new hedge bank, across the parking area, and to that terrace of dwellings. So I think what's really important for me is we need a strong frontage along the road. I felt that it's very important that the houses aren't on that road edge; they are set back to create some sort of defensible space. But then, if you have parking area in front of it, I don't want to see a sea of tarmac, road, and then parking area, then house. So we need that green strip in between of stone-faced Devon hedge bank with planting on top, and then tree planting behind, within the in between some of the parking spaces, and that's just demonstrating how that would look at a level of maturity there in terms of sightlines. Open space plan. Blue areas being areas which are in sort of under the control of a management company, so that is the tree planting within the site. This orange, public access through that dark corridor running up. The blue, no public access, so that being fenced and hedge banked. And then the green, that's the woodland area at the very top, where we have the woodland walk, that would have public access. Important to note on this one, we do have the playing fields some sort of 400 metres off to the east. So although on this site we don't have a play area on site, we've got the playing fields to the east, and then then further play equipment at Meadowbrook, and the outline application had a 106, which required either on-site provision of 3 pieces of equipment or contribution for off-site provision, and the applicants have opted for the off-site provision and will be making a payment to the council to be spent on play equipment in the local area, actually at Meadowbrook. Have a lighting designed as with the previous application. It's only sort of modelled on the boundaries in terms of the light spill from property. So this is the access into the site. These are the 2 short terraces of 3. And again, I have this shown on this plan. This one's a bit easier to see, showing the areas of red. That's the area of land which is over 0.5 lux. So anything outside of that is less than 0.5 lux. And that's the importance for this dark corridor here. The reason these ones don't have any red lines is that they just haven't been modelled, because there's just no need, on the basis of they're not going to have light spill beyond the Devon hedge bank. The junction lighting, so we do have street lighting in this area here. There is lighting to be put in as part of the junction, but none of the light spill gets anywhere close to the dark corridor. So we are okay with that in terms of not having any adverse impact on bats. This is the plan which just shows the dark corridors, the retained hedge bank in dark green, the new hedge bank in this light green colour along the front, so that's stone faced, and then a turf faced hedge bank along the edges for the dark corridors. solar orientation plan. So again, try to get as many dwellings as we can, sort of south facing. So it's 80% of the houses here have are optimised for solar gain in terms of having elevations with windows on facing within 30 degrees of south. And again, for solar panels, as with the previous applications, those would need to be recessed into a slate roof. And again, this is how it was being done elsewhere on the same developer's estate. Condition proposed to require that level of detail to be submitted to ensure that they are flush fitting panels rather than sitting on top of the natural slate roof. A few photographs of the site. So this is from the entrance gate. So the entrance is further off to the left. So slightly sloping up and then kicks up quite steep, well, a bit more sharply towards the top. You see Yarna Beacon in the distance there. This is standing in the middle of almost the access point in between the terrace points. So the road would go through the site there, and that's the area we've cut. And then looking from the very top of the field, looking down, so the main road access here, Limberland Avenue here with the secondary access. Again, looking down the route of the road, so this is the main road here, so that's where the access point would be. And then the secondary access coming through this gateway, or just to the side of this gateway, into Limberland. The view from Limberland going back into those 5 dwellings, so the access point being here, and then down that road there. So, and this road, it helps sort of set out the elevations and the materials proposed for sawmills. Is very much trying to follow what's happening here and not compete against it. So, so a use of render, natural slate, some stone, and where there are, but also where there is timber, it's a natural finished timber cladding, which you will see on the front of the sawmills, front of the Origins development, which was built out a number of years ago. And then some photos looking up the side of the dark corridor. So hedge bank here. This is the pedestrian route up, or the informal route up to the woodland. And then looking back across. And this is where the proposed new footway, cycleway would go to the new bus stop, and then that would link in with the existing footways by the roundabout. Just go back to this one here again, just give you a feel for the elevations proposed in terms of that timber cladding. Again, I do have the elevations of the individual dwellings, which I shall, if members wish, I shall show them some highlights from that, if that's okay. So if you just bear with me while I swap presentation. And again, an indication of some of these units. So that's like the maisonette, which sort of bookends the terrace. One of the terrace dwellings. Another mid-terrace 3-bed property. And I think that's a standalone dwelling. And then move into some of the single-storey bungalows. So mixture of stone and timber, and some of the 1.5-storey units as well, and 1.5-storey unit there. I do have, there's 39 of these to show you if members wish, but I won't go through them all. But if there are any specific questions about any one of the units, I'm happy to share that information. So as I said, reserve matters for the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. This site has a number of constraints, which sort of, I think really there only is one layout, and that's the one we're seeing almost, in that dwellings need to be set back from the road. We don't want them on the road edge. We do still need a strong road frontage. We want to keep some of those sight lines through to the beacon, and open up some of the woodland to the top for improvements and public access. So the application delivers the 12 units of affordable, which is the full complement. And on this one, in terms of biodiversity net gain, although there is some woodland management plan and the works in the dark corridor, in itself, it can't deliver net gain on site. So the local plan and SPD talks about where this can't happen, then off-site net gain is appropriate. And that can be either by making contributions towards buying credits elsewhere, if those systems are in place. But in this case, because we've got a site that's at Broome Park, which over-provides in terms of its net gain, then rather than buy credits elsewhere, it can almost use those. It can use some of the credits it's got on its own site to provide net gain. And when combined, we still see an over 10% net gain across both sites. So it achieves net gain in its immediate locality, only some couple hundred metres across the way in the woodland area at Broome Park. But it's not actually reliant on anything within the Broome Park development. It's only reliant on the fringes, the blue land on Broome Park. So the recommendation is to grant consent, reserve matters consent for the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale for 40 dwellings. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kitchen. Questions? There's quite a few. I'll start with Councillor Pannell, then Abbott, then Taylor. Thank you. Councillor Pannell.
Thank you, Chairman. The surfaces, the road surfaces, permeable or otherwise, that aren't adopted by the local authority, they're the responsibility of the management company.
Yes. So the ones which are not adopted will either be private driveways within the domain of the individual dwelling or be part of the management company areas, although the developers here, who correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's all within the management area.
The second question is, the sets that you've talked about, which the Highways Authority were reluctant to see, what happens in future if they need to be repaired? Because I've seen some shocking examples in towns around our country where sets have needed repair and have been pulled up and replaced in patches with bitumen, which looks absolutely dreadful. Can we condition that they remain as sets?
I'm not sure that we can condition it, but if roads are dug up by a utility company, and then they are required to put it back to the way it was under the highway thing, the highways objection or concern was more that if they have to dig it up for any reason, they would just replace it with blacktop tarmac. They wouldn't want to go to the extra expense.
Can we not prevent them doing that?
I'm not sure we can from the planning side. I'd be really disappointed if they do. And they're talking about in 30 years' time. Yes. But I'm not sure I can, but I felt that it was better to get it in the first instance rather than just capitulate and say we'll just have blacktop throughout.
I'd welcome any advice we can have on whether we can condition that. The third question, if I may, is about the drainage. I understood from the site visit that there was a plan to run a pipe under the A385 into the meadow diagonally opposite, and then down to I guess that's the Wren Brook at the bottom there. I understand that's quite... Is that meadow in the ownership of the developers?
It's certainly within their control. It was Blue Land as part of the outline application. They do have control of it. I don't know if I don't think they have ownership of it. Okay. They don't need it. But
I understand that's a very precious meadow. Is it intended to excavate for the pipe work or to sort of mole it so it's not going to disturb the flora?
My understanding is it's possible to do it through a thrust boring moulling type process rather than a digging process, but it is one where I'd want to see that level of detail, like the construction method statement, to make sure that we're not going to end up within, digging up a wildlife meadow.
Because looking at from the road, there's quite a high elevation from the roadside up to the top to that side of the meadow. It's going to be if you were going to excavate, you'd be going down an awfully long way, and obviously driving through underneath the surface would be a lot preferable. Can we condition that?
I think we can do it under, so there's an outline condition 18, which deals with the drainage, asking for details of the drainage to be submitted with the reserved matters, which they've done. So we could either not discharge that condition at this stage until we had confidence that they had a construction method statement that would not harm the harm anything of ecological value, and we could consult with our colleagues at Devon County Ecology on that. So it could be possible to not fully discharge condition 18 at this stage and use our existing condition on the outline to ensure that that is done in such a way where it's not going to have any
If we do approve this, I'd very much like to see that we have some control over what happens there, and that meadow is not excavated unnecessarily.
Thank you, Councillor Power. Councillor Abbott.
On the stone paving, I do know close to where I live there are brick pavings being lobbed into the river or some other disposal system at the moment. They've been loose and not repaired by the county, and it just seems as though we might be setting ourselves up for failure with this stone set. So I am worried by that, but I don't demand an answer. But what I would like to ask you, please, is you had a view from where the new entrance will be across the fields, and there were orange and white markers in the field. And I wonder if they had any relationship to anything.
Yeah, a mix of markers. Anything blue shows where water pipes are, because they've been on site trying to find the water pipes before the archaeologists get on and do their thing. The red markers are, I think, points of electricity ones. The orange ones are actually mined from the site visit. So, for instance, these little orange cones here and here, they were marking the ends of the two terraces as you came into the site. It was for the site visit, so we could see where some of those properties would be. So that's
okay,
that
grand, thanks.
There.
And then a few slides further on, there's a view of that connecting road into the existing estate, and we're looking down. That will do. That one is the one I was after. A proper footpath to the left, and one of these modern edges that you get in modern estates to the right. I have no idea what the purpose of those are. Maybe you could explain that to me. But is such a narrow footpath for smaller sized people going to continue into the new estate?
I think that they're not meant to be footpaths. I think they're just an overhang for vehicles reversing. So they just stay on the highway. You have this sort of little highway edge thing. So they're not meant to be footways. In terms of what's proposed is, I believe, continuation of the footway on the northern side.
Yes.
But we might end up with the same little overhang, because I believe it's part of the highway design of what they'll adopt. I'll bring up the adoption plan.
I see. That's
So on this side we have the footway and then the crossing point and the footway, but you do have this little narrow sort of vehicle.
And there's a reason for it, is there?
I believe there is a highway reason, but I'm not entirely sure. But I think it's so when you reverse that things can sort of hang over it and still be on the highway.
Okay. Yeah, I'll let it go. Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Rowe. You didn't want to, no. It was Councillor Taylor and then Councillor, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, mine might be irrelevant now, but when we were on site, there's quite a slope from north to south, and I was a bit concerned about the roadway, and if they got adequate provisions to take the water off of that roadway so to then flow out onto the main road at the bottom, because it's a direct line from A to B, from north to south, and when you get thunderstorms, it roars out of there. So is there adequate provision in there to collect that water to take to the attenuations?
Yeah, so the main highway would all drain into the tank. I expect that there must be a point where once you're beyond that tank, there is the last few meters would end up on highway. But everything from those parking areas sort of up. Let me zoom in. So I think everything north of that point ends up in the tank, but everything south of that would potentially go on the road. So there would be the first 8 meters or so, I think, potentially, but the main stuff would all have to go through the tank as part of the highway drainage system. And the highways are very keen on that. They don't want to take anyone else's water on their road. They object if that happens.
Obviously, it's a sloping road that takes it into the edges to be able to collect it somehow. Okay, fine.
Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. Yeah, page 64 of the report, Historic Environment Team, DCC, comment, the outline consent is conditional upon an agreed programme of archaeological work being undertaken. At time of response, the Historic Environment Team is unaware that the required work has been undertaken. As such, I would be grateful if you could make the applicant aware of the outstanding requirement to undertake archaeological works in advance of any development commencing here. There's nothing in the conditions that I could see that have referred to this. Has this just been missed?
The outline consent requires the programme of archaeological works to take place prior to development commencing. So an archaeological study was put in as part of the outline, and that was found that there needs to be further work before development commences. So if they haven't taken place yet, but the whole purpose of them doing the work on the site now is to identify where the pipes are to allow the archaeologists on in the next few weeks to dig without digging through the pipes. But the requirement is on the outline, and the requirement is not to commence until that happens. It's not a case of having to do it before reserved matters are brought in. So, the developer's well aware of that.
If I may, I would have just thought that the archaeological records would perhaps be something that would influence where the new housing would go, because nobody would want to destroy or spoil an important part of an ancient site. So I'm just surprised at that. I'm not. And the other thing I wanted to ask was in terms of the drainage. I remember at the outline planning that it was talked about, and in fact, when I went to the public consultation, it was told to some of the people there that the pipes were going to go round the edge of that Droridge Lane site, not through it, because that little box that's in there shows it actually tipping, going through. And as has already been pointed out, and if you check the contour map, you'll find that they're both on the same contour where it comes out of that gate and when it then goes up into the field. So it's like you are going to have to do digging, and I can't understand why it can't just go down the road. Why can't it be conditioned that the pipe goes? It's only a pipe. Why can't it just go follow the road and go down into the Wren at that point? Because it's as easy to do that as it is to kind of go through that field. And it may be, I don't know which is more cheaper or expensive than the other, but it would certainly do a lot less damage. And that field is a subject of its own outline permission, or full permission, if I remember rightly, that's never been determined. So that field is sitting there with that, and we've never actually discussed the planning on that field for this kind of work, because when it came up at planning, we were told that we weren't discussing it, because if you remember, there was an ecology report, which the members have seen today. It's quite an important little field. It's never been ploughed. So I don't understand how this can be reasonable, that we actually have to look at it now when we've never, it's not on the public highway. Why can't it go through the public highway?
So I've got the application in front of me to judge, but it might be a question for the developer who's due to speak in terms of why it's taken that route rather than another route. I can't explain why they've made those decisions, but this one shows it going around the edge of the field, under the hedge, and then at a point where it discharges into the Wren Brook there. And you're quite right, there was another application, it's still on the books, for a large attenuation pond in this field, I had significant concerns with that, along with many consultees, about that being inappropriate, and that's why we ended up with a potential for a tank here. Now, if this application is approved and this tank is accepted, the developer will withdraw that application for the attenuation bond, because they won't need it, because they will have a consent which allows them to do it all on site. So if this is approved, then that application falls away, and no development proposed in that field, other than how that pipe gets from the site into the Renbrook.
Okay.
Certainly not.
Well, you can ask the applicant about the drainage, and also councillor panel has also raised that issue, because we did see it, and that is a raised roof. Any more questions for Mr. Kitchen? Yeah, councillor Hodgson.
I have no more questions, but I would at this stage like to request a deferral, again on a similar basis to what I requested earlier.
Okay, well, before you go on, do you have a seconder for the deferral? I mean, are there any significant reasons as to why that's different from your first reasons? It's just that, I mean, I don't, rather than you go through all those again and then you don't get a seconder, if there's anything that's particularly different onto why this one is more relevant than the last one in members' minds, then.
So they're two separate sites, and I doubt anybody would second it if they didn't know the reasons I was asking for a deferral.
Okay,
I'm not going to read it all out again. Don't worry, Julian.
No, okay.
I mean,
okay.
we're all.
Okay. No, what I'm saying is like we accept the you feel that there should be a master plan and that things like that, and those are the reasons that you picked up on the last application as to why this would be a deferral. That wasn't seconded. Yeah. It's been a long day. Seconded. So what I'm saying is that if there's anything that's slightly different from that would be very pertinent. But anyway, over to you.
Okay, so what I didn't mention on the last one was the Air Quality Management Action Plan, which is an A385, which passes by this site. Since Beacon Park has been developed and more development is coming through there, there's big HGVs thundering through Dartington using this route and coming through and going on through to Torquay. And that's very significant. I would say that's very significant in terms of why we should actually look at what's going to come forward from that, because we haven't really got any answers as to what's going to be supported. If you look at the joint local plan, when it talks about Dartington, it actually says that this new extra development will be supported. I've never seen anything that's been given to Dartington by this local authority to amend for them, make up for the fact that they're getting, what was it, the allocation? I think I added it up. 460 new homes since 2014 in a rural village. So, I mean, something is breaking a breaking point, and it's the air quality. And I think many people are very, very concerned about it, all along. And it's just going to get worse. So I think we could do with an air quality management programme for this, which is why I would call it for a deferral. I'm not asking for refusal at this stage. I'm just asking for a deferral for that. I'm also very concerned about the drainage. Janice, would you mind putting up that slide for the which shows the contour map? So that's S4. It's called S4. It was in the bundle for Sawmills Field. Very faint with contour lines. That's it. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but where in fact the officer showed a slide, the section in that slide which was talking about the drainage, which went sort of like curved right round. Now you can see that the road is fairly straight. Where it says Webber's house, that's where the site is. So it's coming out kind of about, I don't know, a third of the way along that the road marked as green. So it's coming out there, then it's going to cut into the site. And where that mauve arrow is, thank you, that's the same contour line that runs through into where the entrance is on the field. So it's quite a way down, but actually what you're going to be doing is going up into the field. Can you show the S5, would you mind, please? This is now a photograph which shows what it looks like when you're actually at the side of that field.
S5.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, just looking at that, I would suggest that it's actually the drainage is going to cut across the corner of that field. It's going to cut across following, and you can see there's two lines going across, one across the middle of the field that's in question, and then one just to the left. There's 5 metres difference in height between those two contour lines, so the field is rapidly falling away to where the Wren comes through, that little stream, but above is 5 metres higher. So that's quite a chop down into that field if it was needed to be done. And I can't see any reason why it can't just go down the road. So one of the reasons I'm calling for deferral is that I think they should actually revisit that and actually put those drainage roads in the road. And thirdly, again, I think we need a design panel to look at this. I think Dartington deserves it with all this new development that's going on. We're urbanising the area, and I think it's there. That's it. So you can see where it says that signpost actually says Droridge Lane. There you go. You see where the fence is there up on the left. That's the top of that's the field. That's the height of the field. So you've got this low bit to one side, which is actually which has been cut down to allow vision for visibility for vehicles coming out of Droridge Lane and turning left. But that's cut by the council, and then somebody else has kind of cut it a bit more, and it's due to be cut further where you see the bushes between those two upright posts, which say long calls and weak. That bit is due to be trimmed a bit as well, so that the footpath is there available for people to walk down that side of the road. And if you look just to the right of that grey post on the right, if you look further down, following your eye down the road, you can see a little bit of wall. Can you see where it appears under where the bushes are? That's where the stream is. So why are they not just going straight down the road? Why interfere with that field? So that's why I think this should be deferred, so that they can come back with a better drainage scheme that doesn't interfere with that field, which is not only a good field that doesn't need disturbance. We don't need to disturb the wildlife in the hedge, and we don't need to disturb what is actually a really special field that an ecologist has actually looked at. So those are my main points. But also I would ask for a design team to come in and actually, as I said, for all the reasons earlier, and in conjunction with in accordance to our SPD, that we should actually be demanding much higher design.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hodgson. So Councillor Hodgson has proposed deferral. Do we have a seconder at this stage for deferral? No, so we'll move on. Any more questions? No, in which we will move to the speakers, and the objector is Mr. Chadwick, please. Thank you, sir. You've been sitting through, so you know the protocol.
Sorry?
You've been sitting through, you know, 5 minutes.
Yes.
Before your minute's up, then Ms. Young will have a word.
Yes.
So over to you.
I mean, this must be the biggest meeting of deaf people that I've actually been to, because they actually haven't listened to one single piece of what Jackie Hodgson has been saying, which is the only common sense coming out of this room, which is concerned about her parish and is concerned about what's going on in her parish. If it was going on in your parish, I doubt whether you'd be quite so blasé about it and doing block votes, which is the usual. I've been to a few of these before. Anyway, my name is Ashton Chadwick. I served as a Dartington Parish Councillor for 11 years. I'm a member of the Dartington Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, and I'm actually a director of the Community Orchard Week, which Broome Park actually backs onto. I was principal of an art school in London. Good design has been my concern all my working life. The proposed estates are in urgent need of independent design scrutiny. I attended a public presentation I'm told actually by these gentlemen that it was up at Dartington and not in the village hall as I thought it was. And I couldn't find any elevations. They tell me there were some elevations there. I had to ring Baker to obtain them, and they sent them to me, to their credit. And on seeing the elevations, I was alarmed by the lack of consideration for or understanding the nature of our late medieval hamlet. If we must have disproportionate overdevelopment in our village, it is vital that Southams Council ensures that an independent body scrutinises the design, brackets at no cost to themselves, to ensure that our wonderful heritage and environment are not ruined by unsympathetic design. Since the Southams planner was paid for by Baker Estates, which may be legal but is certainly unethical, how can we be sure that the advice given was unbiased? Larned, a 15th century thatched listed former farmhouse with the original Drover's Way running through it, is only yards away from the proposed development. It is currently shielded by a very attractive and important woodland which benefits both flora and fauna and the residents who live here. Given that Southams Council is committed to recognising the climate emergency, any desecration of woodland, the lungs of this area, would make a mockery of that commitment. Residents of Dartington will also suffer increased pollution as a result of the increased traffic from the developments, which will impact on air quality and health. Week is well used by young and old, walkers, cyclists, children going to school, or use the lane on a regular basis. The lane is narrow, windy, and dangerous. Southams Council and Bakers must work with Devon County Council's Highways Department to prevent traffic driving too fast, endangering lives as it cuts through Week to the A384 from the proposed development. I'm sorry, I've got a dry mouth, so I'm stuttering a little bit. Either an access-only sign or a 20-mile-an-hour sign should replace the ludicrous de-restriction signs currently sited at either end of the lane. Southams Council has an opportunity to influence a plan which could enhance Dartington. Enhance Dartington, not fill it with mediocre development at the expense of residents. I do hope that you will use that opportunity. I know that many of you present do not live in Dartington. You're giving me a time.
30 seconds, sir.
I know that many of you present do not live in Dartington, but I am sure if you did, you would want to protect your residents and your area, and I hope you will protect ours.
Would you mind just waiting for a moment to see if there's any questions?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Sure. The longer I sit down, the better.
Members, any questions, Mr. Councillor Panel?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chadwick, you talked about a lot of trees, but I understand that no trees will be affected by this development, is what we were told in the presentation. Is that correct?
So in terms of trees on the site, no loss of trees on the site to facilitate the development. There is a woodland management plan in place, which is a requirement of the outline, which will see the selective removal and replanting of trees within that woodland area. But that is a long-term management plan of actually improving the plantation over a period of 30 years. But as a result of the development, no trees have to be felled. But as part of that woodland management plan, you will see the removal and replanting of the inappropriate species.
We know about management plans.
Any more questions? Yeah. Councillor
You
Taylor.
mentioned about Week Lane,
Yes.
but that doesn't connect to this site, does it?
runs right, you just go round the corner into Week Lane, and there has been an increase in traffic from the Origins site. Especially when there's any hold-ups at all on the main road, they just whiz through from both directions.
Wrap round. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just say one more thing?
Very briefly, sir.
Yes, these buildings have a total lack of imagination.
Any more questions for Mr. Chadwick? Just so when you say that, I mean, I'm interested. You were a parish councillor. You've talked, and I have some sympathy with it. The idea of a master plan or an independent
Yes.
Design expert to look at it. What when did that sort of cement itself as an idea or
Because I'm on the neighbourhood plan, we've been through an exercise with it for design and heritage with an independent firm who I've forgotten their name now. Sorry? AR Urbanism. And they had two highly qualified people who sit on this kind of scrutiny committee and recommended to me as a member and to the rest of our committee that this activity should take place if we were going to not desecrate, spoil any chance of anything happening which is not overlaying in a very bad way.
No, I get that. And what was the sort of time scale of that, sir? When were you?
About 3 weeks ago.
About 3 weeks ago. Okay, thank you. Right. Any more questions? No. Okay, thank you very much, sir. Right, we will now move to the supporter, Mr. Hutton, again.
Well, thank you very much for your time again, councillors, and I'll try not to take too much of it because there are a number of themes which are in common with the previous application. Although I would say that together these two applications form the most detailed and heavily scrutinised planning applications I've ever dealt with, which I find reassuring. Our proposed development at Sawmills benefits from precisely the same support from all expert consultees and was consulted on concurrently with Broome Park. The application, therefore, is fully in accordance with the development plan. Having said that, every site is unique, and we certainly have not applied a one-size-fits-all approach to the design. Sawmills is a significantly smaller site with a different character bounded by existing contemporary development. At Sawmills, it's 37% of the land which will remain undeveloped in perpetuity. This is around 1.9 acres and secures the necessary desirable biodiversity enhancement. And those are secured in perpetuity in the LEMP. The adjoining development was designed with the intention of continuation onto this site, and we've designed with that in mind and in accordance with the parameter plans, and the proposed design is at a density of 12.5 dwellings per acre, which is a smidge less than the neighbouring schemes. Proposals are 30% affordable, compliant exactly to the specification of the affordable housing officer required, including the 65% social rent. And of course, the open market homes provide a very important component of the delivery to the housing crisis, of which 36% are bungalows. I'll pick up on a few important points that were mentioned, because at outline stage there was a great deal of discussion around the attenuation basin, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on that in a moment. But we have eliminated the need for the off-site attenuation basin. If this application is approved, a number of other water quality measures have been introduced into the site, such as swales, filter strips and smart gullies. And once attenuated on site, the water will find its way to the Bidwell Brook, and I can confirm that it can and will be done with a thrust boring solution. Now, the reason that it didn't initially go down the road is because it needs to go around the back of a tree and enter the stream in the direction of the flow. I can go into that in more detail, but it can be thrust bored so that there will not be loss of hedge or a trench dug at depth through that field and meadow. And I'm pleased that we've been able to do that. Happy to accept whatever conditional control you wish on that. On highway matters, I can answer the query of the half-metre strip. I'll come back to that and the in-print paving. So within the bounds of the reserve matters for scale and appearance, all the consultees agree that the application complies with the policies and the development plan in the same way as the previous one. So I'm not sure how much time I've got left, Janice, but 2 minutes. So I say I'll happily take more questions. But on that matter of the imprint on the road, it's not block paving, it's a concrete imprinted topping, which is the only thing that Devon County Council will accept, and it's very robust, and it goes on as the very last thing, so it cannot be damaged by construction traffic through the site. It's the most robust, the most long wearing. You are right that the highway authorities say that if they were to dig it up, that they would put tarmac back through it, but it is the one material that they do approve. So they're not block paving that comes loose and gets thrown in streams. They're very, very tough, robust material. The half-metre overrun strip, as they call it, is a service margin, and it's a requirement of Devon County Council for the adoption of roads, that if you have a footway on one side, you have to have a margin on the other. And I think that their desire for that is that there are fewer occasions where the road ever needs to be dug up, because obviously if you have services in a margin, it's far less impactful upon residents. So those are broadly the aims behind there. So I guess I'll stop there, but happy to explain anything further.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Hodgson.
3 questions, if I may. My first one is you said that all of the all the various consultees are all happy with everything. I pointed out on page 64 the historic environment team have asked about the archaeology. Agreed programme of archaeological work to be undertaken. Has any of that been undertaken, and how can that be undertaken after you've done the design and layout for the site?
For the very reasons that your officer explained a moment ago. So the physical investigation has not happened. The desk study investigation happened, which preceded the outline application. And Stephen Reed and the team at Devon County Council Archaeology reviewed that and was satisfied that the proposed written scheme of investigation and everything was appropriate. That's gone through, and the physical work is happening on site. If there are, the findings of that will be logged, observed, and all the rest of it, but it's entirely in accordance with the outline. And of course, this being the Reserve Matters application, the discharge of that outline planning permission, a planning condition, is a pre-commencement condition to development, but not something which impacts upon the approval or not of the Reserve Matters.
But you're digging out a lot of the site. At the top of the site, you're digging out, and that could easily be an area because of its proximity to Broome Park, where there's known to be sort of like Roman remains. That means that you could be sort of digging, pre-commencement. But if you've got planning permission to go in there with housing, you're not going to come back to this committee and say, we actually have to relay it all out. I just don't understand why that wasn't done in advance.
No, let me stop you there. I mean, it's a pre-commencement condition. If they don't fulfil that condition, then they'd be in breach.
Yeah, so we'll have a report that says you shouldn't build there or shouldn't dig out there. Okay, my second question is in terms of air quality. On the road there, bearing in mind that we are aware that Origins has added to it, Hyde Tweedmill has added to it, Beacon Park is adding to it. There's all these new developments with all this new traffic coming up and down. What measures are you going to do to actually improve the air quality, or will there be some contribution to make sure that something happens to actually try and improve the air quality on that road, because it's just getting worse?
Well, I'm sure you remember the debate outline around the air quality measures, which were wrapped up in the travel plan and are enshrined in the section 106, because all of those matters were dealt with at outline planning permission and not pertinent particularly to either the reserve matters or landscape scale layout or massing or whatever they are. So, and I'm going from memory now, but as I said earlier today, the section 106 requires a travel plan which has in it measures for car clubs, e-bikes. It has active travel plans, connectivity of the local cycle network, relocation of the public bus stop, which is currently in a place without pedestrian access to it, and all the rest of it. So those measures were all wrapped up and are covered by the travel plan requirement at the outline.
And just my final point, why is the affordable housing always right down by the road? I mean, it seems that the affordable housing quota on the site is a very small proportion of the site. It's really squeezed down. It seems that achieving affordable housing seems to be by having very, very tiny properties. Is that?
No,
I disagree with you on that. The type and tenure and mix of the affordable homes are specified by the council's housing officer, and the greatest need is for 1 and 2 bedroom homes. The size of those homes are dictated by the nationally described space standards, which your SPD dictates the size of those homes. Your SPD also dictates the minimum size of gardens, parking arrangements and everything with them. So it's not the case that the affordable homes are in any way below par. They are the homes that are designed to satisfy the identified need that the Affordable Housing Officer for Southampton District Council put forward.
Okay, and my final point is it possible then to ask for, I heard what you said about being able to do some kind of mole pipe through the field, but is it possible instead to do it down the road to save disturbing that field at all?
For a large portion of it, I suspect that's very possible. But it's important that where the tree roots are at the end, we don't want to damage the tree where it comes out into the road, and the drainage route needs to follow around the back to enter the stream in the right direction, because the Bidwell Brook, as you probably know, flows north at that point. So there's those things. But as I said, if as the officer suggested, you wanted to not discharge condition 18 today, so that could come back, or for that to be picked up in the construction management plan, we're happy with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Panel.
Could I just have some clarification from the officer? If something significant of archaeological merit was found on the site, is there a position where permission can be halted or amended to account for a really significant archaeological find?
No, it's not as if the permission then lapses if they find something, and that's why you have your desk study at the front end of it to understand whether you're likely to. In this case, it's unlikely to, based on the desk study, but in terms of actually doing the investigations and recording, it has to happen beforehand, but things would have to be recorded, but it wouldn't necessarily then put a stop on the development coming forward from a planning point of view. It might get very expensive for the developer, depending on what they find, but it's unlikely they're going to find anything based on that desk study. So, and that's why the Devon County Council archaeologists recommended we put a condition on the outline, asking for that investigation to happen prior to commencement, not as part of the reserved matters.
So that desktop will include LiDAR studies and that sort of thing to establish if there's been any ground disturbance in the past.
Yeah. Yes, I believe it
already has. Yeah. Yes, the desk study did. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? No? Thanks for that. In which case we will move to the parish councillor. That's Councillor Reeves, please.
Thank you. You'll all be aware that the council, I'm a parish councillor, Councillor Barry Reeves.
So if you just want to turn it on, that'd be great.
You'll all be aware that we submitted a comment and objections a while back on this application. Many of them have now been rehearsed significantly already today, so I don't want to go through them again. But we were very disappointed that there wasn't a design review panel wasn't established, because I think a lot of the issues would have been resolved had that been done by the local planning authority, which we thought was mandated to do that as a matter of course, but obviously not. So many of the other objections and issues we raised have been covered, so I don't want to rehearse all of those again. But two main points is, one is to do with the flood risk assessment analysis. It's already been mentioned today that the IPCC's recent report makes pretty grim reading in terms of extreme weather events, and this site with such a large amount of impermeable surfaces and a relatively small attenuation tank is going to lead to further flooding all the way down Bidwell Brook. And although the council seems to be saying that it's not your responsibility if something serious happens downstream sometime in the future, I would suggest the law says, well, you've got a solicitor here, that if you knowingly agree to a plan which was likely to lead to extreme flooding events in the future, then you are responsible as a council, I would suggest.
And secondly, in relation to traffic pollution, I personally, with my pollution monitor, attended the roundabout at Dartington from March 2020 at the beginning of the lockdown, twice a week, every morning at 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, measuring the traffic pollution, particulates, carbon monoxides, and so forth, particulates, sulfur dioxide, and so on. And as the lockdown progressed and traffic gradually built up, there were many mornings when the particulates and sulfur dioxide exceeded the World Health Organization levels. And these developments at Sawmills and at Broome Park are just going to make that worse, despite what's said all about the S106 mitigations. Every single one of these houses has got one or more parking spaces, and we all know what's going to happen. Maybe some of them will be electric vehicles, but with the development at Beacon Park and so on, this is a route which young people attending Dartington Primary School children move along up and down every day at that roundabout, and it's a trap. And this is plus the huge developments that are taking place in the Bay, where a lot of people travel from there to Plymouth through Dartington. There's going to be increasingly serious pollution events, and it seems that the local district council has done nothing about monitoring that properly over the period. So we don't even have a proper baseline except the one I've established from my own personal pollution monitoring. So in terms of a council, the parish council feels that because a design review panel wasn't set up, this whole development is not resonant with the history and heritage of the parish. And I think those are the main points we wanted to make. The rest of it's been covered a number of times already today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reeves. Members, are there any questions for Councillor Reeves? Councillor Foss.
One that strikes me, that you took the trouble to go down and monitor the pollution. I asked a similar question of another site and was told by the authority, not our authority, that within 5 years everybody being electric cars, it won't be a problem. But we won't. Yes, exactly. Did you submit any of that information to the council about what you found?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Right.
The traffic flow between Dartington and Totnes, which is part of the air quality management area, is absolutely enormous. At peak times, over a 24-hour period, at peak times, there's more than 15,000 traffic movements. So you can get an idea, and because it's a sort of a valley and everything's going slowly, why pollution levels rise. And every development will just make this worse.
I wasn't disputing what you were saying. I was interested in what you were saying.
Yeah, it's been an air traffic quality management area for a long time, and nothing's been done about establishing baseline pollution right through that area, right through Totnes and out to the other side.
Thank you.
Councillor Reeves, I've got a question. You're a parish councillor. You've talked about the design review panel. At what stage did the parish council engage with the district council in respect of a design review panel?
This is brought to our attention that one hadn't been established. I think about 6 months ago.
Can I answer that and say it's outlined, Barry? Because this is when Dr. Wyatt said we need a review panel, and that was before the outline.
Yeah, true. I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a requirement for every big development all over the country, not just for this council. And we don't understand why it wasn't established as an independent. There's been many references today about having a coherent design for the whole parish and the area. And this is an opportunity through these independent design review panels for that to happen.
Yeah, no,
At the moment, we've got a look-alike. Some of these houses on this site and Broome Park are exact copies of what Baker Estates has built elsewhere in North Devon. They just...
Yeah, well, volume house builders,
Yeah, exactly. Well,
But
is
I mean,
that good
but I
enough
mean-
for the district?
No, the reason why I'm asking is because obviously, I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for that idea and a master plan, but it's not something, unfortunately, that's happened.
No.
We are where we are, and we've got to deal with this application as is. But I was just trying to ascertain at what stage that I mean, you know, obviously we had it, you know, when we passed our joint local plan and we had allocated sites in Dartington, it was inevitable there were going to be a lot of houses built in Dartington. And I just, you know, I mean, I have a lot of sympathy with Dartington and the fact that it's been inundated with all these extra houses. But I'm, you know, and I mean, it's no consolation to you, but I mean, I think in retrospect that when we have this kind of thing, you know, we have this kind of volume house building, that we need to get this kind of master plan design review panel in at an earlier stage. And
Isn't it part of your policy then?
No. If it was, then we'd be against policy, but it's not. No.
Shouldn't it be part of your policy?
Well, maybe it should, sir.
Yeah.
Maybe it should, sir, and that's something that we can definitely.
And that way, some of this tension between the planners and the lack of confidence that the communities have in planning might dissipate.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that's something that as members we've heard here, and it may be well something that we can bring in within our joint local plan review. But I'm sorry, that's no consolation to you at this stage. Sorry.
I'd like to ask a question of our monitoring officer. There was mention of liability if we, on the flooding, you remember? Did you pick up on that?
I did indeed.
I thought you...
Yeah, no, there's no liability on the local planning authority in respect of flooding. You're discharging a statutory function, and as a result, you have a statutory immunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the gentleman said is if we were negligent, and if they said if you do build these houses here, you're going to flood people downstream, and we went, oh, we don't care, we go ahead with it, then we might be negligent. But that's not what the report says. No. Okay.
But the report, I mean, I don't want to rehearse this, but the report's based on guidelines.
I know,
protocol from the Environment Agency was a 1 in 100 year event. We all know that's nonsense now.
Yeah, I know, sir. I mean, but unfortunately, we have to work within the parameters of that. I'm sorry. I mean, we might think it's nonsense, but that's where we are. I'm afraid. Sorry. Right. Any more questions for Councillor Reeves? Councillor Rowe.
Well, it's not really a question, but in a point of view, it is to do with this, that we've heard quite a lot about the design review panel today, which I don't think hasn't been in situ for several years. We used to have a design panel, used to come in every so often if there was a major application needed to come before them. I think that's a point that we could take on board and maybe slotted in somewhere if we can when the opportunity arises with these big developments that we're getting, if it's going to help the parishes, which we have a number of, which we know all the parishes are not very happy when we say we're going to build X number of houses there, but after a while they accept them. But if that's going to help, I think we should try and take that point forward.
No, thank you, Councillor Rowe. Unfortunately, not here, but yeah. But I mean, that's one thing about. Right. Any more questions for Councillor Reeves? No, in which case we will move to Councillor Hodgson, local ward member.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, actually, SPD, our supplementary planning document 6.12, which I quoted earlier, does talk about, and which I actually read out, so I won't read it out again, but that does actually say that design panels would be of benefit in significant sites. And, there's a whole, has anybody read the SPD? It's really clear that actually... I know I've got better things to do as well. But anyway, so flooding concerns. I agree with the concerns that have been raised by various members of the public that the proposed attenuation will not be adequate for the additional hard surfacing area it will be required to provide drainage for, and we will see flooding problems that are based on now outdated data, as the ISPCC report published just a couple of weeks ago states that climate chaos and its associated storms is more imminent than previously assessed. I also believe that we should seek the attenuation and drainage, that the attenuation and drainage plans should not be permitted to use Droitwich Lane at field, as members who came and looked at the field saw how elevated it is. You've seen my contour map that I used and showed you that It's going to do damage whichever way you look at it. And I think that the mature Devon Bank is one way or another going to be destroyed. You cannot do work on that field in that corner without actually doing damage of some sort. And I think we should further to the offer by Bakers, I think that should be taken off the table for today's decision, and we should look at it again, give them a chance to come back to us with something perhaps more, a better modification that won't interfere with that field. I think we should actually seek proper flood modelling. I mean, as has been said, somebody else off their own back is actually doing air quality model, assessments, which we should be doing, and we're not. We're not doing flood modelling either, and I think we should actually seek that properly, and it should be conditioned. This is part of it, because how will we know? Why wait until some poor row of houses, probably one of the older rows of houses, possibly at Cott, is suddenly flooded out, or the shops at Dartington are all flooded out? Heritage concerns. I spoke earlier, and I won't repeat again, the concerns and professional view on this from Dr. Hilary Wyatt. Her points covered both sites, and I'm sure you won't want me to repeat what she said, but suffice to say this again is urban design, as has been said. It's what's in North Devon, it's what's up the road, it's all over the place, it's the same little pictures get trotted out at every public consultation, and it's highly inappropriate, and it's likely to do harm to the parish and the setting of the listed buildings and the ancient hamlets around us. The lack of Heritage Officer comment on proper assessment is a complete failing in this application, and as such is wholly inadequate. And there remains a very unanswered question regarding the removal of the Heritage Officer's comments. I accept the 6-month rule, but given there hasn't been anything else in writing, I don't think this is good enough. NPPF paragraph 134 states that a development which is not well designed should be refused. And I just say again, Dartington Parish is a rural parish of exceptional landscape quality and considerable heritage significance, and that as the LPA SHDC has a duty to ensure this is respected. Whilst new development will always be needed, this must be introduced in a way that reinforces Dartington's local distinctiveness and architectural heritage. In this case, constructive discussion with the applicants could have produced an amended scheme, which would make a positive contribution to the parish. The parish accepts and knows that the OPA, the outline planning, has agreed for this. All we're looking for is quality. Wildlife concerns. I remind members that this site falls within the Greater Horseshoe Back planning consultation area, as it is part of that protected species for foraging, commuting and roosting area. I'm not satisfied this new development of another 40 new homes of already overdeveloped area will do nothing except disturb and destroy natural habitat, the biodiversity and associated wildlife, including the internationally protected Greater Horseshoe Back needs to survive and thrive. This is net loss of important habitat associated with the wildlife corridors, and I don't think it's appropriate that it should be down to Broome Park to deliver on this. I think it should be within the site. And I don't see how any kind of mitigation is being offered for the loss of the high ecological value field and its associated habitats that is proposed for the drainage pipes to be channeled through. I don't accept that should even be part of this. And unfortunately, again, Southampton District Council has not required formal ecological surveys with counts to even know what numbers or the different varieties of bats are present. I asked for this at the outline planning application. If we don't know what we have now, how will we know that what we have lost at this stage or gained, and whether the mitigation is actually working? We know we are losing wildlife at a terrible rate. We should be insisting on as much protection as possible, especially for our wildlife corridors and foraging areas. Regarding, well, I won't go into that again. I think that the LEMP should be, there should be a condition on the LEMP regarding the LEMP and the inappropriateness of using Broome Park. This is overdevelopment of Dartington. As I said earlier, we've had there's allowance for 460 new homes to be built since 2014. That was when we were told the clock started ticking on the joint local plan. A number of those disappeared when it all got rescheduled at 2016. But nevertheless, we still have a massive amount of housing being delivered in a rural parish. I think it's inappropriate, and I've never had the question answered as to why it got dumped in Dartington, why Rattery next door was allowed to drop from 20 down to 10 houses, why Staverton has 40 houses allocated to it, and the town of Modbury has an allocation of 172 new homes, and they've got a whole high street to deal with it. The additional 40 houses in this application is overdevelopment of Dartington. It's located next to previous developments amounting to 93 additional new houses across the road and in the adjacent field in just the last 5 to 6 years. It's turning a rural parish into a suburb with just one food shop, a garage and a few fancy shops at Dartington. And it's changing the very nature of the parish. Baker Estates did not have to build 40 new homes here. They did not have to build houses right up to the front of the site. And many comments have been provided to the council's planning officers and to Baker's during the process of this development on this site. It could have been something wonderful, but it's not. I support the many residents in this area who have no confidence in the planning system, and I ask you to actually really think about this today. Comments have been made actually at this meeting today. Many are bewildered by the excessive and urban development being dumped in Dartington. This is not following any realistic sustainable settlement policy, nor is it providing the housing we really need. The housing that's being allocated as affordable, it still leaves 60% or 70% of the housing which is unaffordable. It's bringing more people in instead of meeting the housing needs of the people that actually live here or people who want to come back and live here with their families. It's simply another 40 more unaffordable houses, many of which are likely to become second homes and holiday lets and threaten the area with flooding, loss of wildlife and low air quality. We should and can do better than this. I can't support this and remove refusal for the reasons I've given. Would anybody like to second me?
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. So anyway, we've moved into the debate now, as Councillor Hodgson has removed refusal. I mean, just one thing, Councillor Hodgson. I mean, obviously, issues about affordability and open market and things like that, we don't set that. That's set by central government and the joint local plan, which is set by central government, the figures and the parameters which we work in. And I'm sure that everyone here would love it if we only did that. But that's not the real world that we can work in as is. You know, I'm not saying it's right, but I'm just saying, you know, we've got to work within the parameters that we're given. So
my real world is that all that housing got dumped in Dartington.
Yeah, well,
from the joint local plan.
Look,
and I think it's outrageous. And
no,
you know, not everybody sitting here is part of that
joint
decision,
local
but
plan.
I certainly wasn't.
Yeah, no, I accept that, and I have a great deal of sympathy with Dartington, and you know, and I admire your tenacity in fighting for it. But in the end, I mean, I voted against that joint local plan with those allocated sites in Dartington. But it was approved, and that's adopted, and now we have to work with that. And so the reason why Dartington, well, it's excellent communications, and it's outside of the AONB and not in the Dartmoor National Park. I mean, that's, you know, there's not many areas in the South Hams that we can put stuff in. I mean, that is the, you know, that's the truth of the matter. Plus, you had a landowner who was only too willing to sell off land for building. Yeah, well, there we are. But I mean, you know, those are factors that are outside of our control as a district council.
I disagree. I absolutely disagree, because for the DPD in 2010, our officers actually went out and sought sites where they knew they were trying to develop more of a sustainable settlement policy. We didn't do that. There was all sorts of arrangements going on with Dartington behind the scenes, which has meant that we had 19 sites came forward for Dartington. Yeah. How bizarre is that?
Yeah, well, I know. I mean, like I said, but I mean, you know, the landowners are perfectly entitled to put their sites forward. But anyway, let's not debate about that. I just think that, you know,
our infrastructure can't deal with it.
Yeah, okay. Let's stick to this particular specific application as we see. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, Chairman, I was going to say similar things as far as you know, we got the AONB one side and the National Park the other, and we're trying to squeeze a lot in between. I do have a lot of sympathy with Dartington, but when you think about it, I'm right to remember the amount of housing that we've actually had to put in our joint local plan. 70% of it is down just outside of Plymouth. So, you know, it sounds as though we've dumped it all on Dartington. We haven't. I understand, or Ivy Bridge, yes. It is unfortunate, but people have to live somewhere. And I will say one thing before everybody goes. I was accused earlier on of not listening. I've listened for 8 hours today, and I've given it every bit of my attention. You might not think that I've listened, but at the end of the day, we have to work within the parameters that Councillor Brazil was talking about. We might not agree with all of them, but that's the way it is. You know, I'm sorry, but that's the end of it. Thank you.
Right. Cheerio, Mr. Chadwick. Councillor Rowe.
Chairman, are we going to move forward now?
Yeah, we are going to move forward.
Because I think everything that needs to be said has been said, and this site has already got outline permission and it's in the JLP. So I'm not really going to say any more, and I would move approval.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe.
Would second that.
You're going to second that, Councillor Taylor. Would anyone want to say any comments before we go to the vote or the vote, or anything on the conditions? I know that there were a number of issues in respect to the. Sorry.
What about condition 18 that was going to be?
Okay, so yeah, there was something that Councillor Pannell and Councillor Hodgson raised about the drainage pipe going into the.
I think Mr. Kitchen has addressed that by saying that can be reserved further to be approved by.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the general consensus amongst the councillors is that we're very loath to see any damage done to that particularly important field. And so we would like to have a condition that makes sure that the least possible damage. I respect the fact that they're going around the back of a tree. So I mean, in that way, they are, rather than chopping a tree down.
They did offer to investigate whether they could go down the road as far as possible, and certainly if they're going to thrust bore as opposed to moulling it, that hopefully could be done under the hedge without damaging the hedge.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Fairbairn.
Yeah, Chairman, I think the suggestion was made that in respect of that you agreed the recommendation, but that you didn't discharge one of the conditions. I forget which.
18.
Condition 18. So if you amend the recommendation or the proposal, it's to grant reserve matters approval for appearance, landscaping, length, layout and scale, and confirm compliance with conditions 9, 12, 15, 16 and 17 of the outline consent.
Okay, and as proposed and seconded, happy with that? You are? Okay. Right, so we all clear what we're voting on. We're voting for approval of this reserve matters application, but we've reserved our judgment on condition 18, in to paraphrase it. Right, so can I have a show of hands of all those in favour, please show.
Thank you.
And those against? That application.
8 for and 1 against.
Thank you, members. It's been a long day. Well done. That application is approved. I think we've covered all the other agenda items. We did that before lunch. So I would like to formally close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.